check, check. Check, check. Test, test. Alright, I think I'm good with this. Let me just scooch my chair a little bit so I'm not quite so hunched over trying to talk to y'all. Just that. Okay. You may notice my lighting is slightly different. The lamp I usually use broke. I don't know if the lamp is busted or it just needs a new bulb, but either way, I don't have one. So we're using my overhead lights in the room, and that's why my forehead is so shiny. And it really highlights the receding hairline. So I'll probably try to get that fixed. Hold on, do I not have a more recent save? I forget. Okay, no. Yeah, this is the most recent save. Okay. In good news, my new computer is almost fixed. Or it is fixed. It's being shipped back to me. So I should have it back by... It's supposed to arrive on Thursday, but I may not be able to sign for it on Thursday, so I may not get it till Friday. But, who's what's it? So this is the article in question, is it? The small box deposited with the pawnbroker by Mr. McGilded 2 months ago. And on the night of Mr. Winterbeck's murder, the only item on the shelves that was touched by whoever broke into the shop. Quick, quick, let's open it and see what's inside. Oh, a music box disc player. Good gracious, this is no ordinary box, it seems. Wow, although in truth I had an inkling that might be the case. It would appear that the box houses a miniature music box movement. Then, is it too much to expect? I think it would be reasonable to assume that it is a device for the playback of this disc, my lord. So here we have the means to play back Mr. McGilded's disc, deposited at Windibanks at much the same time. Not strictly correct, my lord. It was not McGilded's disc. It was the disc of his victim in the omnibus. But why, for heaven's sake? Are we to understand that the brickmaker was trying to sell this music box disc to Mr. McGilded? I believe the answer will become clear if we listen to the music on the disc, my lord. Yes, very well. Let the court now listen to this curious disc at last. Wait, my lord! Good grief, what is the meaning of this, Inspector? The music box and the disc are, well, they're unrelated to the case. No need to spoil the somber atmosphere in the courtroom with some silly bit of music. This disc may very well have motivated the culprit in this case to commit murder. Clearly there's every chance that it's fundamentally important to understanding what happened. The prosecution has no objection. But no, that piece of evidence is police property, something. Clearly Scotland Yard has some vested interest here. But it is policy of this prosecutor to leave no avenues unexplored. And you, Inspector, have no jurisdiction here to prevent that from happening. No further delays, please. Play the disc. That sounds like Morse code to me. What on earth? That's certainly not what I would call music. No. It's just the same note playing over and over again in an irregular sequence. Ha 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 ha. Mr. Graded, this really is priceless. After all that, the music box is broken. Broken? It can't be, can it? Well, obviously. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the officer sent to fetch it didn't drop it on the way back to the courtroom. Well, with much regret, I feel the court must accept that this music box offers little in the way of clues. Are you ready to move on, counsel? Come on. Yes, alright, it does sound as though it's completely broken, but is it? Could this music emanating from the music box possibly be a new clue? It could be a clue. I believe that it could be relevant, my lord. Good lord, but how can it be? It's an abomination, counsel, mere noise. I fail to see how it can have any meaning whatsoever. It does sound strange, I agree, but there's one thing bothering me. While Graydon stands there chortling victoriously, the inspector beside him has a rather telling expression on his face. It's as if Gregson recognizes the sound and is as if he's familiar with it somehow. That's making him appear extremely on edge. If that's the stance of the defense, my Nipponese friend, answer me this. Oh? Just what relevance do you propose this woeful chiming has on this case? It's the defense's belief that the sound emanating from this music box is not supposed to be music. Just because this is a music box, it doesn't necessarily mean that the sounds we're hearing are music. Look at that, the smile vanished from Graydon's lips as soon as I said it. I'm on the right lines here, I must be. Hee, making deductions based on how people react to what you say. You're acting just like Hurley, Runo. The sounds we're hearing aren't necessarily music. Well, now that you've told us what they are not, I'm sure the court would like to hear what they are. Do enlighten us, my Nipponese friend. Well, surely you have an idea in mind, because if not, it will be the death of your ill-formed argument. Exactly. The music box is clearly broken. Refusing to accept that fact is pure foolishness. They've got me. I don't know what the answer is yet. Runo, I've just examined the music box very thoroughly. I'm fairly certain that it's not broken at all. Really? Really, the way it's been made, it can only produce a single note anyway. Thank you, Iris. Alright, well, if the music box isn't broken, it must mean that the sounds it's producing have some significance that isn't musical. Ah, could it be? Is that what these sounds are? Something's just struck me, Runo. I feel like recently, in the past few hours even, I've heard another sound very much like this one, like the one this music box makes. Yes, it's a familiar sound. Actually, Iris, I was just thinking exactly the same thing. I'm going to have to press the defense for an answer. Your assertion is that the sound produced by this music box is not, in fact, music at all? And what the devil is it, Counsel? All the evidence we've seen so far, all the testimony we've heard, it's all pointing to one singular answer now. Prosecution demands that my learned Nipponese friend present proof now. Tangible proof of this latest wild speculation. Alright then. This could be the best chance I'm going to get to fight back in this trial. If I'm right, it's going to join all the dots together. The evidence that explains the true nature of the sounds on this music box disc is... You probably have to present the paper, right? Today's paper, Counsel? The headline is Pawnbroker Perishes in Pickpurse Plunder. Hardly supportive of your cause. Ah, no, my lord, I was hoping you'd look a little further down the page. Further down? Ministry Mole, classified secrets may have been leaked overseas from Ministry of Justice. Yes, this is a very serious matter being investigated at the highest level, I understand. I have heard that international transmissions along supposedly secure lines are somehow being intercepted and leaked to various other countries. And presumably, those transmissions are in the form of wired telegrams? Of course. Juror number 5, your input, please. Stop. Oh, me, sir? Whatever is the matter? You told the court before that you worked at the same communication station as Mr. Graydon, did you not? Yes, that's correct. And the particular station where you work deals with government communications and newspaper reports? Oh yes, we're not your run-of-the-mill communication station at all. Our work is extremely important. Then tell me, is this not a very familiar sound? You don't mean to say, is it? That's right, madam. It bears more than a passing resemblance to the sound made by your telegraph machine as you tap it. I believe it's called Morse Code. But I don't believe it. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to leaking telegrams from government departments, there could be nobody more perfectly placed than a highly skilled communications officer. Are you suggesting that the music box disc contains stolen government secrets in Morse code? Order, order, please everyone, order, but this is high treason, Counsel, deserving of capital punishment. Too much new vocabulary. What is this treason, and what is capital punishment? Sorts of words I'd half expect you to know. For our sovereign government's confidential information, hostile nations would surely pay almost any price. Yes, and on that night 2 months ago, that was the very negotiation that was taking place inside the omnibus. But in the end, McGilded perished, and the all-important disc lay unclaimed in the pawnbrokery. My word! In which case, whoever stole that information in the first place must surely have been beside himself with worry. Because if the disc were to be discovered before it found its way out of the country, it would reveal an act of high treason, punishable by death. So the culprit had no choice but to retrieve it, and in order to do that, he would have to gain entry to the pawnbrokery illegally in the middle of the night. Because the article left behind by Mr. McGilded would incriminate him too much if it got into the wrong hands. Isn't that right, Mr. Graydon? You think I've been stealing government secrets? Preposterous. Absolutely preposterous. So in response to the defense's accusation, you claim complete innocence, do you? Well, of course I do. I've had to stand here in silence while that pretentious foreign lawyer has been prattling away.
Objection!
Then by all means, counter the charges, sir. The prosecution demands the witness testifies in response to the accusations brought by the defense. Delighted, I'm sure. Witness is reminded that the crime under scrutiny in this trial is the murder of the pawnbroker, Mr. Wendebag. That being a most flagitious offense for which the law of this land sanctions a capital punishment. But the heinous act of high treason is no less serious a crime. I urge you to bear that in mind as you testify, Mr. Graydon. So then, let us proceed. You may. Nash. You gotta let us have a rabbit and pork here, Governor. We got things to say. I beg your pardon, who do you think you are? Name's Nash Skulkin. Occupation is professional baddie. Name's Ringo Skulkin, but we ain't baddies enough to sell out our motherland. That's right, we're what they call the Three Skulkin Brothers. Bad timing, fellas. Very bad timing. Graydon's counter. A mere communications officer couldn't possibly steal confidential government information. Besides, the sounds produced by that music box aren't even Morse code. It was some low-class brick maker negotiating with McGilded anyway, was it not? I have no relation to the man. Look, all we done is break into the gaff the other night like what he told us to do. If we'd known there was dodgy government secrets involved, we wouldn't have touched it. Mr. and Mr. Skulkin. One Mr. will do, Governor. What's up? Do I take it that you now admit to the crime? And on the night in question, you did indeed gain entry to the premises illegally. And moreover, you did so as a party of 3 in collaboration with Mr. Graydon here? We did, Gov. We did. Quieten down, please. What say you to that, Mr. Graydon? I have no idea what these 2 ruffians are referring to. You little rotter, getting us mixed up in all this monkey business. You never said nothing about no government secrets. It was supposed to be a straight-up job. And what about the geezer whose shop it was, eh? Poor old bloke didn't have to die, did he? Ah. Nice to know who your friends are. Whatever these men say, I deny the accusations. Indeed. Well, I certainly wasn't expecting this little music box to become so significant in the proceedings. However, as it has, I will admit it into the court record as evidence. So we should probably check out the music box. This is the mechanism that turns the bumps on the disc into sound, isn't it? Yes, the movement. It's all thanks to the comb with its teeth that are plucked by the passing bumps. Usually the teeth on the comb are different lengths so that each one produces a different tone. But this comb is very strange. All the teeth are exactly the same length. Well, what does that mean? It means that no matter which tooth is plucked by the passing bumps, the music box will make the same sound. I've never seen a music box like this before. Yes, it is strange, a music box that can only play a single note. There has to be some significance to that, surely. Anything else of note? Oh, what is it, Runo? I've just noticed something about this music box. It looks like the bottom of it opens up as well. Ah, you're right. Well, come on then. What are you waiting for? Let's open it. Alright then, here goes. Look at that. There's another movement on the underside. So does that mean you can set another disc to play back on this side? Yes, I think so. And it looks like the two movements are linked together. They're linked. So if you had two discs, they would play back at the same time. Interesting. Who would have thought there would be a second movement on the underside of this box? And this movement is like the other one. The comb's teeth are all the same length. So this movement also only produces a single tone like the other one? Yes, it must do. Except that the length of the teeth on the two comb isn't the same. So the single tone produced by this movement will be different to the single tone we've already heard. What? Basically, each movement can only produce a single note. But the notes they produce are different. The music box can only play two tones. I get it. So this side plays back one half of the conversation, and this side plays back the other. So is this newspaper headline accurate? Government communications are being intercepted? How could I possibly know? What do you mean by that? Any important government communications are handled by high-level officers, by specialists. General members of staff in the station where I work would never be entrusted with sensitive information. Oh no, stop. Must say something. Stop. Let me guess. Juror number 5. We regular communication stations officers aren't as lowly as you're being led to believe. A team of us are responsible for setting up and testing the telegraphs used by the Ministry. And Mr. Graydon is the team leader. That's fascinating. Graydon is a highly skilled operator. Stop. Currently in presence of idol. Stop. So you had access to the equipment used for these confidential communications, Mr. Graydon. Well, what of it? The transmissions are always made behind closed doors, so they can't be heard. And in any case, all messages are sent enciphered. Normal employees couldn't possibly understand them. Oh no, stop. Must say something. Stop. Mr. Graydon regularly attends meetings with Ministry technicians and the Ministry communications team. He assists them in ensuring that there are no errors in important international communications. And he's received the top prize at the Cipher Cracking Convention 5 years in a row now. That's fascinating. Graydon is a highly skilled operator. Stop. Currently in presence of idol. Stop. Well, your idol would appreciate it if you'd keep your mouth shut. She should really pick her idols more carefully. I tell you, this lawyer's accusations are completely unfounded. Besides, the sounds produced by that music box aren't even Morse code. They're not? To anyone with a brain, that would be blatantly apparent on listening to that music box for even a few seconds. Of course, of course. Surely it can't be that my learned friend is unfamiliar with Morse code. Ouch, he looks genuinely shocked at my ignorance. Ah ha ha. I would be more than happy to demonstrate the basics for you, sir. A lesson here in court. Morse code is a continuous series of two distinct tones. Tones, you say? Yes, a short dot and a long dash. By combining those in different ways, you construct letters. I see. For example, this is A. And this is B. But when you listen to the sound produced by this music box, you only hear one tone, don't you? But it sounds so similar, the rhythm of it is the same in everything. But there's no discernible meaning to this apparently random sequence of sounds. Oh, so that's what the music box is for. Ha 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 ha, really, you shouldn't be so surprised. What did I tell you? That music box is nothing but a worthless piece of scrap. Perhaps you might consider studying your subject matter before casting aspersions in the future. Stop. Nothing to say, but stop. Oh, it's so frustrating, isn't it, Iris? I mean, if the government secrets were somehow being leaked using the music box, so many other things would slot into place so nicely. Will there still be something I haven't considered? Would it really be impossible to use this music box somehow to play back Morse code? Give it a try. There's still every possibility that this music box was instrumental in the leaking of government secrets. That's the belief of this defense, at least. Does it please you in some way, my Nipponese friend, to repeat the same line of argument ad infinitum? It's already been established that to be Morse code, two tones are required, dots and dashes. Yes, I'm well aware of that. Then what? Well, it would appear the defense has a hypothesis to put forward. You'd better present your idea at once, counsel. How do you propose that this music box, which appears to produce only a single tone, could have been used to cipher secret messages into Morse code? Well, let's flip open that extra compartment. Looks like the bottom of it opens up as well. Oh, you're right. Well, come on then. What are you waiting for? Let's open it. Alright then, here goes. Look at that! There's another movement on the underside. What does that mean? You can set another disc to play back on this side? Yes, I think so, and it looks like the two movements are linked together. They're linked, so if you had two discs, they would both play back at the same time. Who would have thought there would be a second movement on the underside of the box? And this movement is like the other one. The comb's teeth are all the same length. This movement also only produces a single tone like the other one? Yes, it must do, except that the length of the teeth on the two combs isn't the same. So the single tone produced by this movement will be different to the single tone we've already heard. What? Basically, each movement can only produce a single note, but the notes they produce are different.
Got it!
Good gracious, what am I looking at here? Another movement on the underside of the music box? What? It appears, my lord, that the two movements are linked together. In other words, you can put two discs in this music box, and the sounds of both will play back at the same time. Good heavens! As the court has heard, Morse code comprises of two tones, a short dot and a long dash. With a second disc in place, this music box could be used to generate Morse code and convey a message. This is beyond a joke. I'm sorry? This poor excuse for a lawyer has absolutely no evidence to support his claim. Though, of course, if my learned friend were able to present the court with the second disc, that would be another matter. Well, I can't at the moment. May I remind the court that, as the witness has pointed out, he was not the one in the omnibus with McGilded 2 months ago, striking a deal over the disc or discs. Indeed, that was Mr. Mason, the brickmaker. Exactly, I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Though it has holes, I must admit the argument presented by the defense has much promise. I believe the cross-examination should continue. The link between Graydon and the victim of the omnibus case must be there somewhere, but I haven't found it yet. Oh dear. Looks like you need to give your argument more strength, Bruno. You will reiterate your testimony if you please, Mr. Graydon. If I must, though, I maintain exactly what I did at the start of this pointless cross-examination. So I guess we need to do more to prove this. So 2 months ago, in that omnibus, McGilded killed the brickmaker and stole the disc. Mr. Mason was a single man with almost nothing to his name. It seems he lived in an artisan quarter some years ago, but people there remember little about him. That doesn't make much sense though, does it? How would a humble brickmaker come to acquire secret government information? How indeed? There must have been somebody else involved behind the scenes in all of this. Somebody who acquired the disc and gave it to Mr. Mason in order to take it to the meeting with McGilded and negotiate a deal. Dear me. You may have it in for me, sir, but I assure you I have far more class than that. An old brickmaker from an artisan quarter and this well-to-do communications officer. If only I could find some evidence to link the two of them together. If you have nothing more to add on that note, let us return to the witness testimony. Let's see. Do we have any evidence? I don't think we do yet. Let's try pressing on Nash and Ringo. Like Mr. Graydon told you to do, you mean? That's it, yeah, who else, eh? Silly me thought he was just popping over for a natter after all them years, but the rotter had a dodgy job for us. Ash? Let me stop you there, Mr. Skulkin. After all them years, you say? Do you mean to tell me that Mr. Graydon is an acquaintance of yours? We're the sociable kind of baddies, you know? Sure. Let's say Graydon's an old China. Ringo has something to say. Is something wrong, Mr. Skulkin? Eh? No, the other Mr. Skulkin. What? Who, me? When your brother was testifying just now, he said something that seemed to cause you to react. Oh, I was just remembering the old days, that's all. We used to have a right old laugh together way back when. Together with Mr. Graydon, you mean? Yeah, with Ash. I mean, you look at him now in his fancy whistle and flute and you wouldn't Adam and Eve it. But when he was younger, he was from the poor part of town, just like us. Is that so? But he was always a learning one. He had the brains, he had the savvy. Always coming up with smart ideas like what would never have gone through our heads. Gore blimey, ain't that the truth? Remember Milverton and Skulkin's Milk Run? That was a corker, eh? Save it until after the trial. Your reminiscing has no place in this courtroom. Neither does your fruit. Oi, the geezer asked us a question, didn't he? And we was answering. Yeah, we ain't done nothing wrong. Nevertheless, the court is not prepared to accompany you on your trip down memory lane. Counsel, can we turn our attention back to the testimony, please? I don't know, could that sentimental story be relevant somehow? Let's add it to the testimony. My lord. Yes, counsel? The brother's last sentimental statement could hold vital information relating to this case. Very well, counsel. I will permit the brothers to supplement their testimony with that detail. Briefly, I hasten to add. Say no more, a skulkin's never skulkin'. I love these guys. Milverton and Skulkin's Milk Run. Gore, them were the days. I'm sure I'm going to regret asking, but what exactly was that? Some kind of business? Just a little scheme we had going back when we was youngsters. A bit of fun, really. Delivering fresh milk to the locals, that's what it was all about. That sounds alarmingly legitimate. There must be a catch. I suppose since we're here, I should ask them to elaborate, but on what? The business model. So how did your little business work exactly? Well, every morning down our way, the milkman would come with his cart to deliver milk, see? If you stuck your empties outside your front door, he would leave you them full again, right? So, we swooped in on the action, got people to sign up with us. We promised to deliver milk for half the price of the other geezers doing it. People couldn't wait to sign on the dotted line. We were raking it in, we were. So did you live on a dairy farm or something? Gordon Bennett, are you off your rocker? We had nothing. We were too poor to have a farm. Right. No, what we had going on was simple once you add the idea. We'd just switch them over, see? Our customers' empties with the full ones from anyone who wasn't on our books. A doodle, right? Or dawdle? I think you meant to say a diddle, and that's a crime. It was just an armless bit of fun, that's all. Milking the general public in such a fashion is most certainly not harmless, as you put it. Well, it was him what came up with the idea. Ash is the evil genius. You mean Mr. Graydon? Yeah, Ash always had his head in a book when we was growing up. Said he was gonna get himself an education and get out of the slum we lived in. Poor, we all ragged him about that, didn't we? Told him he was soft in the head to even think it. But look at him now. He's only gone and become a blinking communication officer, ain't he? A communications officer, Mr. Skulkin. Sholmes and Wilson's Milk Run. No, Iris, don't even think about it. All of a sudden, we seem to be up to our necks in a serious matter of national security. Although all this talk about interception of secret government messages is still conjecture at this stage. It would explain a number of things, though, wouldn't it? The negotiation Ginny overheard on the omnibus 2 months ago, and the break-in at Windibanks. But the trouble is, it wasn't Mr. Graydon in the omnibus with Mr. McGilded. No, that was Mr. Mason, the brickmaker, who was so horribly murdered. If only there was some link between the two men somehow. I know, but Mr. Graydon's testimony seems to be as watertight as ever. I wonder if the key to us making headway with the cross-examination here could be those two brothers. Let's press on this just because we haven't yet. So you did know nothing about this music box? We didn't know nothing. We still don't know nothing. We ain't planning on knowing nothing about it neither. But 2 nights ago you did indeed break into Windibank's pawnbrokery, didn't you? In your original testimony, you said that the door of the shop was ajar and that it was like some kind of sign begging you to go in. But the truth is, you were planning to break into Windibank's all along, weren't you? We were, Gov, we were. You're right there. Because that's what he told us to do. It was his plan. And why was it Mr. Graydon's plan to break into Windibank's that night? Did you not ask the reason? Well, he said the place was full of stuff worth nicking. That's what he told us beforehand, anyway. Turned out it was a load of cobblers, didn't it? I weren't best pleased, I can tell ya. In any case, if they know the real reason, it doesn't sound like they're going to give it away.
Hold it!
Let's ask about the name. So this business was just a bit of fun, you say? And it was just yourselves and Mr. Graydon involved? Yeah, that's it. Milverton and Skulkin's milk run, was it? Yeah, that's it. Where did the Milverton part come from? Oh right, I thought a clever clogs like you'd have worked that one out. That is... Enough of this. How much longer are we expected to listen to this drivel? I don't. Let me guess, you don't accept anything these 2 witnesses are saying. Tell me, why is it that it was only at the mention of the name Milverton that you decided to interject? Because well... It weren't the happiest of homes that one came from. Yeah, his old man was struggling for money so much his wife walked out on him. She took the name Graydon then, see? But Ash will always be Milverton to us. Milverton. So that used to be your surname, did it? Of course not. This is all bunkum. I've been a Graydon since I was born. Do you really think you can rely on the testimony of these 2 thieves? You're a communications officer attached to the civil service. As such, your personal details will have been thoroughly checked at the time of your appointment. It would be a very simple matter indeed to subpoena those records, Mr. Graydon. Ah! It would appear that Mr. and Mr. Skulkin's testimony has been reliable for once. You were born Ashley Milverton, then. Is that correct? Very well, yes. Ashley Graydon was once Ashley Milverton. That information could change things, and could turn out to be extremely important. Was thrice-fired Mason's name Milverton? Is there a way to look at profiles? I think there is no way to look at profiles. So 2 months ago, yada yada yada. Mr. Mason was a single man, almost nothing to his name. It seems he lived in an artisan quarter some years ago, but people there remember little about him. Doesn't make much sense, though, does it? How to humble brickmaker? Oh, indeed. Dear me. Does it have anything for me? Okay, can we not... Oh, wait, hold on. He was your father,
Objection.
Mr. Ashley Milverton. Tell me, why did you try to hide your former name from the court? Because I haven't gone by that name for years. It means nothing to me. No, I don't think that's the real explanation at all. The truth is, you had a reason to hide that name. Explain yourself, please, counsel. I have here the notes from the omnibus case, my lord. And as we all know, the victim, the man who we now understand to have been negotiating with McGilded. Yes, Mr. Mason the brickmaker. That's right, only Mason wasn't his surname at all. It was his given name. His full name was Mason Milverton. Milverton? Do you mean to say, saints alive? Mr. Ashley Milverton, is it not the case that the brickmaker, Mr. Mason Milverton, was your father? Oh, I don't. I believe I mentioned earlier, your family history will have been thoroughly checked when you join the civil service. And it really would take no time at all for the court to subpoena those records. Grr. The truth is, you've been illegally acquiring highly confidential government information and selling it on to McGilded in collaboration with your father. Ugh. The new facts and evidence unveiled by the cross-examination of this witness all come together to reveal the truth. The truth, you say? That you collaborated with your father, Mr. Mason Milverton, in illegal dealings with Magnus McGilded. By dint of this music box, you mean, counsel? Yes, stealing information being sent in secret government communications and selling it on to McGilded. Mr. Graydon concocted this elaborate scheme of using 2 music box discs to encode the information as presumably a safety measure against the information falling into the wrong hands. And a very effective one. I shouldn't have given the scheme any credence whatsoever. But the deal with McGilded went sour, and the brickmaker met his end. Yes, but before he was arrested, McGilded managed to temporarily dispose of the stolen disc at the pawnbroker. Then, having learnt of the situation, you appeared at Windibank's 2 days ago in an attempt to recover the 2 articles McGilded had placed in pawn there. But that attempt failed. One of the discs was seized by the police, and the other you never found. So that same night, you enlisted the help of the Skulkin brothers and broke into the pawnbrokery. This time, determined to recover the second disc. Are you suggesting that the second disc was inside the music box? Eh? We never knew nothing about that. On the night that Mr. Windibank was killed, the intruder to the pawnbrokery touched one item and one item alone, the music box. It was rather ingeniously demonstrated using the 2 prints from the security camera, indeed. So the question that naturally begs answering is this: why was only that one article disturbed? The answer is obvious, because it contained the second disc which the intruder was desperate to retrieve. Since if it were to fall into the hands of the police, it would be proof of high treason. Well, Mr. Graydon, do you deny that all of this actually began on that fateful night 2 months ago? Aye. I refuse to accept any of this nonsense. Sir, there appears to be blood seeping through the sleeve of your jacket. What? Ah! 2 nights ago, we know that 3 shots were fired at the scene of the crime in Wendabank's pawnbrokery. 1 took the life of the pawnbroker himself. 1 struck the pouch around Mr. Sholmes's waist. And the final bullet struck the calendar on the wall of the shop, having first pierced the arm of one of the intruders. Mr. Graydon, that wound on your arm that you seem to be trying to hide, it's a bullet wound, isn't it? He's got you now, me old China. Time to call it quits and croak, I reckon. Sisk. Don't acknowledge my presence there under any circumstances whatsoever. Those were my terms, remember, and I paid you handsomely to comply. Clearly, I was a fool to think I could trust some common backslum thieves. Fine, I admit it. I was there in Wendabanks that night. I paid this pair 10 guineas to accompany me. And as you've noticed, I sustained an injury in the course of my adventures. But that is all. I admit to nothing more. Stealing government secrets, negotiating with Mr. McGilded. As God is my witness, I'm sure I recall nothing of the sort. He's not going to go down without a fight, not until I can show hard evidence, I suppose. Nevertheless, the defense has now established a crucial fact, which is, well, we know that 1 bullet was fired from each of the 2 firearms we have in evidence. The bullet from the Skulkin Brothers' gun hit the pouch around Mr. Sholmes' waist. And the bullet from Mr. Wendabank's gun clearly must have been the one that caught Mr. Graydon on the arm. Indeed it must. We can rule out the possibility that the man shot himself. And that leads us to only one conclusion. Mr. Wendabank was shot by a 3rd gun, which can only have been fired by the 3rd intruder. Goodness. That's right, Mr. Graydon. Grr. The only person who could possibly have shot Mr. Wendabank that night is you. So in the process of making him defend himself for high treason, we got him to admit that he was there. And because he was there, he had to do the murder. Ha 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 ha! You little upstart. You made a grave mistake when you summoned me here. What? What's that supposed to mean? Yes, as you rightly say, I was there at the pawnbrokers. I did my best to hide the fact, naturally. I have no intention of ruining the distinguished career I'd built for myself at the communication station. But did the thought never cross your mind? Did you never consider the possibility? What do you mean? What thought? What possibility? The possibility that if I was there at the scene, I may have witnessed the crucial moment? You see, this makes me a key witness in this case, and I have my hands firmly around the neck of your client. What? Are you suggesting? I saw it all. I saw the very moment that pickpocket girl pointed the gun at the poor defenseless pawnbroker and shot him. You what? Order, order, order! Well, it would seem we are finally entering the last act of this theatrical trial. Mr. Graydon? Yes? I trust you are fully aware of the implications here. If it is shown that your claim is false, you will have incriminated yourself as the killer. Oh, I understand fully. I mean, he's already incriminated if his claim was not made. The court probably would have convicted him. So I see where he's coming from. Then I must ask you to give your formal testimony once more. You will explain to the court precisely what you saw at the moment the defendant allegedly shot the victim. Nothing would give me greater pleasure. The moment of the shooting. While these ruffians were jostling with the broker, I was still near the entrance to the shop. When Windibank threw Nash over the counter, I felt a sharp pain in my arm. I pursued the man, but he shut himself in the storeroom. I could see him through the peephole in the door, though. The accused, in a black coat, shot the man in the back as he was trying to flee to safety. I saw the blood spatter all over that wretched girl. Then she tossed the gun out of the peephole, so I picked it up and made my escape. Good gracious! This is quite an extraordinary testimony. You claim, sir, under oath, to have clearly seen the defendant pulling the trigger. He also claims to have tampered with the crime scene and not called the police. These are a lot of crimes he's admitting to. It wasn't my intention to testify in this way, but neither is it my intention to be found guilty of a murder I didn't commit. So you see, my hand has been forced. I tell the truth now as an act of self-preservation. The truth? Until now, the prosecution was completely unaware of these details. Yes, well, sorry about that. Having shot me in the arm, the pawnbroker was then shot in the back by the accused. And as I said, she was showered in his blood. You say the blood spattered over the accused's coat? Are you sure on that point? Oh yes, quite sure. All over the black overcoat the pickpocket girl was wearing at the time. Really. If her coat could somehow be shown to harbor vestiges of blood, that would be conclusive evidence here. Such an investigation is entirely possible, my lord. What? Of course they're gonna find blood because it's Mr. McGilded's old overcoat. And the blood from the Mason thing. Only very recently, a German scientist has developed a technique to identify human blood. So here's to true science, not some amateurish detective's dubious foray into the world of chemistry. There's nothing dubious about Hurley's work. His ideas are sound. Ideas are no use to us here. In science, as in law, theories must be proven before they stand. In Germany, the technique has already been employed in the courtroom as the basis of evidence. Scotland Yard has a small quantity of the chemical reagent used, with your lordship's permission. We could shatter all vestiges of doubt within minutes. This doesn't look good, Runo. Why not? Well, we know, don't we, that there's blood all over the front of Ginny's coat. If they test it with their chemicals... Oh, help, you're right. I was forgetting what happened yesterday. Don't move, Ginny. I'm gonna shoot. But that's not Mr. Windibank's blood. That stain is from 2 months ago. That's Mr. Mason's blood, when he was stabbed by McGilded, who was wearing the coat at the time. My lord, the defense objects to the test proposed by the prosecution. Overruled. Lord Van Zeeks, make it so at once. With pleasure, my lord. And while we await the results, the defense may proceed with the cross-examination. If they find that blood on the overcoat, Gina will be... Counsel! Yes, my lord. Your cross-examination. Of course, my lord. If this cross-examination doesn't go well, if I don't manage to uncover some decisive evidence or a really compelling clue now, I have a very bad feeling about the outcome of this trial. So we're going to need to be very careful. Well, these Ruffians were jostling with the broker. I was still near the entrance to the shop. That doesn't seem like important information to press on. When Windibank threw Nash over the counter, I felt a sharp pain in my arm, clearly implying that Nash's gun went off when he was thrown over the counter or something. I pursued the man, but he shut himself in the storeroom. I could see him through the peephole in the door, though. The accused in a black coat shot the man in the back as he was trying to flee to safety. I saw the blood spatter all over the wretched girl, but all of his blood spattered out the front of him, yes? Like, this is already a contradiction. We're definitely gonna have to press on something, though. Let's just press on this one by one. I'll save in case there's, like, some unseen mechanic where it's like, oh, if you press on the wrong statement too many times, the test comes back and you fail.
Hold it!
Mr. Windibank emerged from the storeroom, I believe. Ringo and Nash were scouring the counter when he suddenly appeared and flew at them. He already had the revolver in his hands. Fortunately, I wasn't too close. Never been so scared in all me life. Yeah, we're just your regular, mild-mannered burglars, that's all. We don't like violence. Says the pair who carry a gun. What do you mean when you say you were near the entrance to the shop? I was in the doorway, running my eyes over the shelves of forfeited items. Looking for the music box, of course. The broker went for Nash in the first place, then Ringo joined in, making it 2 against 1, so I assumed they could handle the situation. But I was wrong. I was trying to help me little bruv, but the old geezer chucked me over the bloomin' counter. So I pulled me gun on the old fella, and that soon made him a scarper. A pair of you setting upon the poor defenseless pawnbroker together, shame on you. Sorry, Gov.
Hold it!
Let's check on this. You mean that's the moment you were shot? Yes, though I didn't immediately realize what had happened, of course. Things crashed to the floor from the counters, the 3 men were brawling. It was at exactly that moment that it happened, so I didn't hear the gunshot. And the bullet went on to strike the calendar in the wall behind you. So it would appear. When I looked at my arm, I saw it was bleeding badly, so I wrapped my handkerchief around it. Seeing as I couldn't explain what had happened to a doctor, I had no choice but to wait for it to heal. I didn't imagine it would still be bleeding 2 days later. Did Mr. Windibank intend to shoot you, do you think? Well, now, I don't imagine he even noticed I was there, to be honest. Perhaps the gun went off accidentally. Anyway, it didn't quite strike home. When I pulled my gun on him, he tried to shove me out the way, and then he scarpered through the door out back. At which point, what did you do? Pursued the man, but he shut himself in the storeroom. I could see him through the peephole in the door, though. You mean you chased after him? I don't recall the reason why, but I ran after him to the back of the shop. And what about this peephole in the door you mentioned? Well, unsurprisingly, the storeroom door is a solid job made of stout wood. But there's a small opening in it about head height that lets you see what's what in there from the outside. Actually, I should know that, shouldn't I? I looked through it myself that night. And what about you burgling brothers? Did you see what went on through this peephole as well? Not likely, Gov. Didn't see nothing of the sort, Gov. I doubt these 2 buffoons were even aware of the peephole's existence. So the Skulkin brothers were there, but they didn't see the killing of Mr. Windibank take place. Inside the storeroom, I could see the broker and the young girl standing there. The defendant? Yes, though neither of them noticed that I was looking. The girl raised her gun and pointed it straight at the man. And then, what did you see next? The accused, in a black coat, shot the man in the back as he was trying to flee to safety. Yes, when the crime was discovered, the defendant was found with a gun in her hand, but that was Mr. Wendybank's gun, from which only a single bullet had been fired. And as we've already established, Mr. Graydon, that bullet was fired at you. Ah, but no, it wasn't the broker's gun that the pickpocket girl had when I saw her. Yes, the bullet from Wendybank's gun grazed my arm, and yes, the Skulkin's gun grounded the detective, but this was another gun entirely, a third gun. The broker's gun was not the murder weapon, so clearly there had to be a third firearm involved. In other words, the accused must have had her own gun with her at the time. But no other gun was found at the scene. Ha 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 ha. Calm yourself, counsel. Sorry, you must consider the events in order. At first I saw the broker and the girl glaring at each other, but then all of a sudden, the broker turned to run, and then it was at that moment the little gutter rat shot him in the back. Chilling image, I must say. I saw the blood spatter all over that wretched girl. All over her? Yes, through the peephole I saw it clearly. Of course, the stains are invisible now, what with the coat being such a dark color. But I assure you, that garment is sullied with the victim's blood. Well, it is sullied with blood, that's for sure. But it's not Mr. Wendybank's blood, is it? No, that's right, it's Mr. Mason Milverton's blood from when the Gildan stabbed him 2 months ago. So annoying, if they'd only accept Hurley's chemical analysis we could prove that, but they won't, so unfortunately we can't use it as evidence to support our case. Bother. Then she tossed the gun out of the peephole, so I picked it up and made my escape. Did I hear you correctly? She threw the gun out the room? That's right, after the broker fell to the floor, she started walking over. Over where exactly? In the direction of the storeroom door, to where I was watching. Of course, I quickly retreated, and then the girl dropped the gun through the peephole onto the floor on my side of the door. But why on earth would she do such a thing? I couldn't tell you. Perhaps she was hoping to distance herself from the murder weapon. Without thinking, I went and picked it up. I suppose I was worried about just leaving it there in case any more tragedies took place. Sure. So it was you, in fact, who took the third gun from the scene of the crime? Yes, it was yours truly. I left the clear up to my lackeys and left. Clear up? We'd made a bit of a mess around the counter, so Mr. Whistle and Flute Ear told us to tidy up. He thinks he's our bloomin' mum sometimes. Well, I was paying you enough, by God. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? You're like a bull at a gate, aren't you?
Excuse me.
Gentlemen. Ha, 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 ha. Something wrong, Sunshine? That should be my line. You do realize you were just violently shaking Mr. Skulkin. Blimey, this D's a bit of a hooligan, ain't he? What was going on just now? You saw him, he grabbed me whistle. Why, the blazes, he said, didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down the station? And why didn't you? 'Cause we didn't know nothing about it. Or that flamin' peephole in the door. Sorry about that. I can be prone to losing my rag sometimes. Not hurt, are ya? Gor blimey, see the way he's looking at me? I'm telling you, this D gives me the willies. That was strange. The inspector doesn't normally get quite as worked up as that. He wouldn't normally grab someone. No, that wasn't like Regsy at all. He's normally all sweetness and light, no matter what I say to him. Yes, well, I think you might be a special case, Iris. Well, anyway, that was definitely out of character. My lord! Requesting your lordship's permission to interrupt cross-examination. Explain yourself, officer. I have the results of the test that was ordered earlier, my lord. Ah, the blood on the accused overcoat. Thank you, officer. Very well, the cross-examination is hereby temporarily suspended. I presume you have no objections, counsel? No, my lord. Well, there you have it. The report, please, Inspector. Yes, sir. Traces of human blood were found on the overcoat of the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade. From the extent of the stains, it would appear that they were the result of spattering following a gunshot wound. End of report. Goodness me. See, what did I tell you? No, the blood on that coat is not Mr. Windibanks. What on earth makes you say that, counsel? The coat originally belonged to Magnus McGilded. Just before his coat was deposited at Windibanks, McGilded had fatally stabbed Mr. Mason Milverton. So the blood on that overcoat is the blood of the brickmaker from the omnibus case. Well, the dead cannot speak. Isn't that right, my neat bunny's friend? Sorry? 2 months ago, in this very courtroom, did you not argue fervently for McGilded's innocence? And yet now that the man is dead, you brand him a murderer? Your conduct shatters any shred of respect you may have earned for yourself in this country. Arg, but that was... I call it a bally disgrace. Treachery, that's what it is. How to determine whether the blood on the coat is 2 months old or not? Even the stereoscope couldn't help to answer that. Help the answer to that problem pop out. It can't be done. But, we use Mr. Sholmes' specially formulated chemicals. Mr. Sholmes is a detective, not a chemist. Would you put such faith in a chemical formula devised by me, for example, when I'm a communications officer? I held out Piroski to starving boy, and he ran away crying. Sherlock Sholmes is barely more than a figment of the public's imagination. His name carries no weight in this courtroom, no weight at all. How could you say that? Victory is sweet indeed. This proves that my testimony is the whole truth from start to finish. How do you arrive at such a conclusion, sir? The witness said the accused's coat was splattered with the blood of the victim. The only way Mr. Graydon could possibly have known that fact is if he saw it happen. In other words, his testimony is solid and the conclusion is singular. It was the accused who shot the victim in this case. That is the whole truth. Arg! Okay, so... My lord! Been a long battle this one, but this old warhorse has something to say now, if you please. Mr. Foreman, as of this moment, sir, the squadron has reached its final decision. Ready, men? All for one now. Sir.
Guilty. 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 Guilty.
All right. One last summation examination. Presumably. Well, it would appear the ladies and gentlemen of the jury have reached a unanimous verdict. The defense has consistently failed to unpick this witness's testimony. We have not consistently failed. We have been unpicking his testimony this entire time, except for this one testimony that we were still cross-examining. Here's to any attempt you may make at unpicking the juror's decision being equally successful. Ugh, wah! I don't believe it, after I've come so far. How is it all unraveling on me so fast? How very distressing to be held in such low esteem. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Naruhodo? Officer? You've delivered the report now. That will be all, thank you. It occurs to me with some regularity, Mr. Naruhodo, that scientific truths are determined not by science, but by none other than the human mind. I know that voice. Am I going mad? Ah! It's her luck, isn't it? Of course. Mr. Sholmes! What? What is the meaning of this? Order, order, order! What business do you have here, detective? The last I heard you were recuperating in the hospital. As well I would be had I not been set upon an errand. What errand? Hurley, it's really you. You're awake at last. Yes, good day, Iris. I appear to be rather late to rise. My apologies. Now, my lord, if you will humor me. In what manner, sir? I have something of great importance I wish to give the young lawyer over there. I need no more than 5 minutes. Would you be so kind as to spare us the time? What say you to this, Lord Van Zeeks? This trial has taken many hours of the court's time, having spent so long already. Exactly, having spent so long already, we don't want to go wasting any more precious time. As I was saying, having spent so long already, it would seem churlish to deny the defense a mere 5 minutes. Eh? So what I think is happening here is, Van Zeeks could pick up on, since Gregson was just telling us to hurry it up, basically, that this is something that he doesn't want us to see, and how Van Zeeks wants us to see it. My dear fellow, I apologize for my tardy arrival. Mr. Sholmes, are you alright now? Ah, alright, I'm all wrong. Sorry, I've only just managed to summon the strength of the stand, man. I asked the judge for 5 minutes. But I fear even that may prove too much for me. Pray forgive me should I pass out. Let's make this discussion as short as possible then. Hurley, this place is full of idiots. None of them can see how wonderful your chemical blood analysis is. Ah, well, that concoction of mine was really just a bit of sport to assist me in my investigations. I never took the trouble to refine it for appraisal by the scientific community. An oversight on my part. Right. Modesty? Surely not. But enough of that. I'm here to give you this, my dear fellow. What's that? A lavender furoshiki wrapping? A leaving present from Miss Susato. From Miss Susato? If possible, matters were to be settled without me giving you this. Those were her instructions when she asked me to do her this favor. I don't understand. Miss Susato foresaw today's events, I believe. She knew that the culprit would attempt to escape justice by means both devious and underhand, and that you, Mr. Naruhodo, fighting fairly as you are wont to do, would find yourself in considerable peril. At that very moment of crisis, you were to be given this small parcel. Those were the dear lady's instructions. A leaving present from Susato-san, whatever could it be? What is this? Oh, it's the machine I made. Ah. Look, I used this. It's my latest invention. What is that? I call it the cat flap-o-mat. It can make a cat flap for a little furry friend like Woggy in seconds. What's Susie up to? Miss Susato muttered the following words before she left. I'm a failure. I don't deserve to be a judicial assistant. What? Didn't she say something like that? You really are the best judicial assistant in the world. Well, that's extremely flattering. But I'm sorry to say that I've been a complete failure. Whatever did she mean by that, Mr. Sholmes? That night, when you left Windbanks in pursuit of the thieves, Miss Susato made use of this contraption for a certain purpose. That is your answer, my dear fellow. Not at all cryptic then. Susato used this cat flap-o-mat that night, but why? Did she install the peephole in the door? But it had a handle on it. Your 5 minutes is over. We're out of time already. I'm grateful to you for affording us that brief recess, Mr. Reaper. I need no thanks, Detective. After all, the die is cast. Is it really? The jurors are unanimous in their leanings. No doubt my learned friend will consider a summation examination. But any attempt to alter the verdict now would be utterly futile. I wonder... Mr. Naruhodo. Yes? The rest is down to you, dear fellow. What is your plan? The rest is down to me. I need to be careful here. If I make a wrong move, the trial will end badly. Let's go ahead and save, just in case. Those vicious teeth look like they could rip through almost anything. They're good, aren't they? They're made of a special alloy I developed just for this job. The cutter rotates 10 times per second, so it can get through any kind of door in no time at all. And what are the two parts at the top there? Ah, those are for attaching hinges to the section of door that gets cut out. Right, of course. Nothing can match this machine for power. It can make mincemeat of even the toughest of doors. It sounds so charming and friendly when you say what it's for, but it feels like the reality of the cat flapper-mat is that it's a grim weapon of door destruction. Wagahai is so adorable, there's nothing I wouldn't do for him, even developing deadly weapons. My lord, the defense requests... I think further cross-examination, but let me check something. And by check something, I mean a guide. Because I want to be sure. Okay, okay, so we do go to further cross-examination.
Objection!
The jurors have spoken. Protocol dictates that you may not cross-examine a new witness now.
Objection!
The defense is not asking for the cross-examination of a new witness, rather to continue with one of an existing witness. What? It would appear that a rather important detail has escaped your attention, Mr. Reaper. Requesting your lordship's permission to interrupt the cross-examination. Thank you, officer. Very well. The cross-examination is hereby temporarily suspended. Presume you have no objection, counsel? No, my lord. So nobody can say anything then. If Bruno asks to resume his cross-examination of Mr. Graydon, the court is obliged to allow it. This is absurd. I would remind those present that this is my courtroom. I concur that the defense is entirely within its rights to request the continuation of the cross-examination. However, I will not permit an unremitting protraction of these proceedings. Therefore, I have decided to afford the defense one final opportunity in concluding the cross-examination. Counsel, you must choose but one statement from the witness's testimony and but one piece of evidence to present in support of your argument against it. A single chance to present evidence. So I have already looked at the guide, so I kind of know what the answer is here, but I think I could have figured this out anyway. Basically, we could present one piece of evidence. I wonder if we should present the new piece of evidence. If following that the situation remains unchanged, I shall move to adjudication. Is that clear, counsels? You will not press the witness any further. My lord. Yes, my lord. A single statement and a single piece of evidence. Most generous. Well then, Mr. Naruhodo, it's high time I fell in a dead faint. I leave this in your capable hands. That is one way to faint. Thud. Mr. Sholmes! To stand so insouciantly before the court in a state of such high fever. Either the man has extraordinary strength of mind or an extraordinary lack of feeling. I imagine he's feeling very little now. The detective is sleeping soundly in one of the antechambers. Strike a man when he's down, why don't you? Quite literally down. Well then, counsel, are you fully prepared? Yes. One statement, one piece of evidence. I won't let Mr. Sholmes down or Iris. And I won't waste this final chance that Susato-san has given me. It is going to decide the entire outcome of the trial. Very well then, under the terms I have outlined, you may resume the cross-examination. Well, these ruffians were jostling with the broker, yada yada yada. So let's present our new Peephole Maker.
Objection!
What on earth is that eccentric contraption, counsel? Oh, it's my cat Flap-O-Mat, my lord. It makes a way for cats to get in and out of a room. It can cut through any door you can think of and make a new little door in the middle of it. That's right, my lord. It's a device for creating so-called cat flaps. Small doors for cats to come and go as they please without their owners having to open the main door. I'm sure we can all work that out for ourselves. But that cat lover's contrivance has no possible relevance to this case. Oh, really? Of course it doesn't. To start with, there was no cat flap in the pawnbroker's door. Not being a keeper of cats myself, I'm afraid I failed to see what this has to do with the matter at hand. Perhaps it would help if I described its function another way, then. This contraption is able to create a peephole in any door you can imagine in practically no time at all. I beg your pardon, a peephole, you say? 2 nights ago, we arrived at the scene only minutes after the murder of Mr. Wenderbank had taken place. That's right, according to the paperwork at the yard, it was you, your Japanese assistant, and Sholmes. Yes, the 3 of us were together, and it's recently come to my attention that my assistant made use of this device at the time. Your assistant did what? There was a peephole in the storeroom door, I can attest to that. Because I looked through the peephole myself in order to see inside the locked storeroom. This is ludicrous, what are you trying to say? Of course there was a peephole in the door, I said as much in my testimony. How else could I have witnessed the crime, for pity's sake? Yes, how could you? What? Counsel, kindly say what you mean. Alright, it's time. Time to strike the final blow. What I mean is this, my lord. My assistant made the peephole in the storeroom door, and until such time as she did, the door had no hole in it to look through. What? No! So we're just gonna take this as fact? It kinda seems like they shouldn't. This is a farce. Are you really suggesting that the peephole in the door was... Yes, it was created only after the incident had taken place by my judicial assistant using this device. Your assistant tampered with the crime scene whilst being fully aware of the gravity of her actions. That is a most serious act of vandalism. For which I humbly apologize, my lord. It was in a few minutes that I left the scene in order to pursue the Skulkin brothers and alert the police. Nevertheless, in the light of this new information, it becomes apparent that Mr. Graydon's testimony is riddled with holes. Riddled with? Explain yourself, counsel. The majority of Mr. Graydon's testimony that appears to incriminate the defendant is based upon what he witnessed through the peephole in the storeroom door. Yes, that filthy girl shooting the man in the back. However, if at the time of the incident, that peephole did not yet exist in the door, there's no possible way that you could have seen what you claim to have seen. Grrr. In short, your entire testimony is a pack of lies. Oh. Order, order, order! Is there any credence in this revelation? None whatsoever, as my learned friend must surely realize. Exactly, this is just some cheap trick designed to discredit me. I'm afraid not, sir. Of course it is. Do you seriously expect people that plaything can cut through a solid wooden door? Oh yes, I designed it to be very powerful. It can cut through even the toughest of doors. That's absurd. I don't believe it for a second. I had a feeling you'd say that. What? Woggy, cooey, time for dinner. Aww. Well. Ah! Young lady, this is the Old Bailey. One does not make cat flaps in the oak paneling at the Old Bailey. I'm not done yet, don't worry. This doesn't mean that the peephole in the storeroom door at Windibanks was made by your machine. And there's no way you can prove that it was. No, but it's easy. What? Cat flaps my cat flapomat creates are all of a fixed size. And the dimensions of that peephole at Windibanks are an exact match. Ugh. Hee hee, old Silky's lost for words. Excellent work, Iris, thank you. And now it's my learned student's friend's turn to be lost for words, I feel. I believe your judicial assistant has already left the country for your Eastern Island home. Well, yes, that's true. And you may have some difficulty in establishing all of the facts. For the sake of argument, let us assume the peephole has dimensions that are a perfect fit to this contraption. In that case, when was the peephole cut? The prosecution demands proof of your answer. Ugh. What is the purpose of your line of inquiry, Lord Van Zieks? It's very simple, my lord. The defense argues that the peephole was created after the incident using this device. But now that the perpetrator has returned to her native land, she cannot testify to the fact. There is no proof. Ugh. And for as long as the defense remains unable to prove when the peephole was made, my learned friend's claim amounts to nothing more than a baseless accusation. What? Indeed, that is so, Lord Van Zieks. Well, counsel. Don't give up now, Runo. This is the time to create your own opening and force your way through. I don't know if I can do this, but I do know one thing. Susanoo-san is the greatest judicial assistant in the world. Very well, the counsel for the defense will Present evidence to support the claim made. Prove that the peephole in the door of Windybanks in the storm was created after the event and not before. Can we present... the photograph of Gina? What are you, a print from the detective's infernal cameras again? Sorry, I think I just bumped my microphone. It might have made some noise. My judicial assistant, Miss Susato Mikitoba, is an extremely intelligent and capable woman, which is why I never had any cause to doubt that she would have considered this scenario and made sure that I had the necessary proof. There's just something by my feet that I want to move. So I can, like, spread my legs out a little bit. And the necessary proof is this photographic print, Counsel. This print shows a scene in the shop moments after the defendant entered the premises. Agreed. And it also shows the accused mercilessly wielded a gun in the direction of the defenseless broker. But more to the point, it pictures the storeroom door in the background. Let me see that print again. I don't believe it. This really is quite remarkable. The door to the storeroom is completely devoid of a peephole of any description. Ugh. Mr. Graydon. You couldn't possibly have witnessed the crime as you claim to have done, because at the time it happened, there was no peephole in the door. Ugh. In other words, your testimony is a catalog of lies. Guard. Order, order, order! I am satisfied that the defense has substantiated its claim beyond all reasonable doubt. This witness's testimony was entirely fallacious. It's not the only thing we now know beyond all reasonable doubt. My learned friend's assistant's guilt can no longer be denied. The woman tampered with a crime scene. But more importantly... Good lord, there's more Lord Van Zeeks? The defense may have established a reprehensible instance of perjury. But that is no proof that this man is the victim's killer. Yes, that's right. Even though the prosecution said if his claim was found to be false, it will have proven that he is the killer. What? I was there at the scene, it's true. And I was shot in the arm, it's true. But that's all. Yes, in fact, if you look at the circumstances, I am the victim here. Oh, please. No! I don't believe this, but they're right. As it stands now, I don't have any definitive proof that he is the culprit. Still, he can't worm his way out of it now. Iris, you know what they say. There's no point in locking the cat's door after the cat has bolted. Isn't that right, Runo? Shirley always says, one lie begets another. No, wait, that might have been a line I wrote for him in one of my stories. Well, no matter who said it first, you're right. Mr. Graydon, not only did you give false testimony to the court, but the lies you told make no sense. Make no sense? What do you mean by such a remark? What you said in your testimony reveals that you know something you shouldn't have known. In other words, there is a fundamental inconsistency in your statements. Objection. What? This is provocative talk, counsel. Won't you enlighten the court? Explain this alleged inconsistency. Iris was right. One lie begets another. The inconsistency is revealed by the lies in the witness's statements. Show that Mr. Graydon had knowledge of something he shouldn't have known anything about, namely, the bloodstains on the coat. The bloodstains that were present on Miss Lestrade's coat. That's right, the victim's blood splattered all over her when she shot him. But how could you possibly have known that? Obviously, because I saw her do it through the peephole in the... The point is not that you lied in your testimony, Mr. Graydon. It's the nature of the lie you concocted that is so revealing. You're not making any sense. Let me ask you a simple question. How is it, Mr. Graydon, that you knew of the existence of the peephole in the storeroom door? What? Well, obviously Arg. Has the cat got your tongue, witness? The peephole in the door was made after the incident occurred, and once I returned to the shop, having failed to catch the two burglars, Scotland Yard's investigators arrived immediately. Since that time, the police have been at Windibanks constantly carrying out their investigation. Isn't that right, Inspector Gregson? Well, yes, of course. The place is chock full of pawned articles, and my lads have to thoroughly examine them all. But I gave the order to have officers working around the clock in shifts so we get through it all. And consequently, there's no way that you, Mr. Graydon, could have gained access to the shop. Therefore, you should have known nothing about the peephole in the storeroom door, so the fact that its existence forms the basis of your testimony is completely inexplicable. Ugh. And yet, the fact remains that Mr. Graydon did maintain that he witnessed the crime take place through the peephole in the door. How on earth is that possible? Could I have a word, please, Lord Van Zeeks? Speak, Inspector. It's just that I really ought to be getting back to the station now to put in my report. There's really nothing more I can add to this testimony, so if it's all the same to you... Permission denied. Oh. It's not all the same to me, Inspector. Not at all. You will remain exactly where you are until this trial concludes. Of course, sir. Mr. Graydon, you shouldn't have known about the existence of that peephole. Which can only mean that you must have been informed about it by somebody else.
Objection!
Stop there, my learned friend. You realize, I trust, that the words you just uttered have extremely serious implications? Yes, but the defense believes that the details about the case that Mr. Graydon claims to have seen must have been revealed to him by a certain person before his testimony. In fact, considering a particular clue we have, there's really only one person that could be. Who is the person in question, counsel? Who gave this witness details of the crime scene to facilitate his false testimony? So, it would have to be... So I'll be honest, I don't know exactly who. I mean, I think it's Gregson? Because of the people who have talked to Graydon, the Skulkin brothers would not be privy to the details of the crime prior to stepping foot in the courtroom. Strongheart would be unlikely to be the person in question. I feel like it's gotta be Gregson.
Take that!
The truth is, it can only have been you, Inspector Gregson. Eh? Me?
Objection!
You'd better have some proof to substantiate such a rash claim, my learned friend. Consider the fact that we have only been aware of Mr. Ashley Graydon's identity for the last few hours. We learnt of it only during the course of the trial today. Indeed, preparations for his testimony were made with great urgency during our hour-long recess. While the police executed the subpoena and brought the man here from the communication station. And until that time, Mr. Graydon would have had no idea, no inkling that he would suddenly be required to appear in court. Are you suggesting that until such time as he was summoned? Yes, my lord, until then, it's reasonable to assume he knew nothing of the peephole. It was only once Mr. Graydon was in the stand that he realized his position, that he would have to defend himself against the accusation that he was the third intruder. You're suggesting to the court that it was while this trial was in progress that he received the information? So that he could commit perjury in order to save his skin? Exactly, and the only person with knowledge of the investigation that he had any contact with is you, Inspector Gregson. This is a bloomin' outrage. Why would I be giving away details of our investigations to this fella, eh? I was summoned to his lordship's chambers during the recess in any case. Have you forgotten that? Quite true. I had a number of questions regarding the events that transpired at the pawnbrokery. Which means... first time these two laid eyes on one another was after proceedings resumed following the recess. Since then, they've been in full view in the stand where such illicit discussions couldn't possibly have occurred. Wasn't there a time where they were whispering to each other? Oh, I've just remembered something, Luno. What is it, Iris? There was one time before, wasn't there? I think it was when Ginny was testifying. Oh yes, now that you mention it. When the bailiff was dispatched to retrieve Magilda's music box from the scene of the crime, that's it! It was during that testimony. I remember finding it strange at the time. Mr. Graydon and the inspector seemed to be having some kind of secret discussion. It would have been possible for you to give Mr. Graydon the information he needed then. You little toe rag, you're making all this up. I'm a respectable Scotland Yard inspector, for crying out loud. Why would I do something like that? Why'd I be giving away confidential details to the likes of this bloke? Admittedly, he wouldn't have had any reason to do something like that for no gain, but perhaps it was part of a deal of some kind. Then it starts to make more sense. What deal, counsel? I wonder if perhaps, in exchange for details about the peephole at the crime scene, Mr. Graydon agreed to give a certain something to the inspector. I'm sure I need not remind the inspector that if found to be true, striking a deal of any kind with a witness would be considered a gross case of malfeasance. Well,
Objection.
It's becoming clear that jumping in with accusations is this Nipponi student's specialty. I don't do that. But with the stakes so high, the prosecution is not prepared to listen to baseless charges. It is incumbent on the defense now to present evidence in support of this diabolical claim. Evidence? What are you proposing that the inspector demanded of the witness in return? The court must see proof of this alleged deal. Inspector Gregson really did strike a deal with Mr. Graydon. And logically, there's only one thing he could have asked for. That must be it. Bruno, do you think it could be? Yes. The missing link that would join all the dots together in this puzzle. I must press you for an answer now, counsel. What evidence explains the nature of the alleged deal that Inspector Gregson made with the witness? So... I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea here. We don't know the contents of this story. I'm trying to think what pieces of evidence have not come up. I assume we present the music box disc here, but let me check. Let's present the music box. Inspector Gregson, besides this murder, is it not true that you've been working on another very important case? What are you getting at now, Sunshine? Is it possible that this other top-secret case is what's alluded to in the newspaper article here? Classified secrets being leaked overseas from the Ministry of Justice. How the bleeding Nora could you? We discovered during the course of this trial the music box deposited at Windybanks by Magnus McGilded, a special music box designed to play 2 discs at once. It would seem very likely now that encoded on the pair of discs that were in McGilded's possession are the leaked classified secrets. So I put it to you, Inspector, that in order to recover the second of the discs containing those secrets, you covertly made a deal with Mr. Graydon in which you exchanged the disc for details of the case. You little arg. Order, order, order! On the day of the incident, when we met you at Windibanks, you said this. I'll be taking that whatever it is of McGilded's down to the yard, thank you very much. So hand it over. No, don't give it to him. It's mine, that is, mine. I'm sorry, miss. Anything belonging to McGilded has to be taken in as evidence now. Scotland Yard already knew at the time, isn't that right? Magnus McGilded was involved in the stealing of government secrets. My orders were, recover the medium used to convey the secrets leaked from the Ministry, and do it on the QT. Strictly hush-hush. And that explains why, when I presented this disc as evidence to the court, you objected so heavily, I presume. Because you knew that it contained highly confidential information. Well, I mean, not likely. I mean, I wasn't that sure of it myself. I realized there was a possibility, that's all. Inspector, surely you're not saying that in order to acquire the second of these music box discs, you did indeed reveal confidential details of the crime scene to the witness, to aid and abet this man in giving false testimony? There's no other way that Mr. Graydon could have known of the existence of the peephole. It's the only explanation. A deal was struck between these two men. No, God.
Objection!
If, and I stress if, this sobering assertion turns out to be found in truth, it would mean that the second disc is, as we speak, here in this very courtroom. Wait, what? In this room? Could you possibly make a claim like that? Because Inspector Gregson is a Scotland Yard detective. What? What's that supposed to mean, eh? As a seasoned policeman, the inspector will have approached this alleged deal with caution. Certainly he would not have accepted a gentleman's agreement in this manner. No, he would have insisted on having the article agreed upon in the palm of his hand. Good gracious, then you mean to say Inspector Gregson already has the item in question in his possession? He has the second disc actually on his person? The defense demands that the inspector is searched at once. Definitely, they can only have struck a deal with each other when Ginny was testifying before, and Gregsy hasn't moved from the witness stand since. My lord, please order an examination of his personal effects immediately. Well, Inspector? This young lad wants to tone down his imagination. He's insulted me in my profession quite enough. However, if it'll put this matter to bed and dispel any doubts about my involvement, then I'll happily submit to a body search. What? He's going to agree to it. Presume you're aware of the precipice on which you now teeter, my learned student friend. You've made a most serious allegation against Scotland Yard here. If following the search of the inspector's personal effects, no disc is found, you will be deemed unfit for court service, this trial will end, and my country's government will formally demand of yours that you are severely reprimanded. That sounds serious. Indeed, to have a visiting student make such defamatory remarks about our country's most senior police force. It's not something Her Majesty's government will be able to overlook. You're just threatening Runo because you're scared. The accusation is beyond serious, you must be prepared for grave consequences. It's true. Can't imagine Gregson would have accepted a gentleman's agreement for something so critical. This must have physically changed hands, which means the inspector should have it. But somehow, something doesn't feel quite right here. Very well, counsel. You know the implications, so let me ask you one final time. Yes, my lord. Do you still persist in formally requesting a search of the inspector's personal effects? Search someone else. the defense formally demands the search be conducted. Well, don't say you weren't warned, but your typical Negronese stubbornness may well land you in hot water this time. Perhaps the lesson will do you some good. Fair enough, I've got nothing to hide. I did choose someone else, right? Okay, I did say search someone else. Bailiff, conduct a search of the inspector's personal effects, please. The defense demands a search, but not of Inspector Gregson. What? Now what's all this? I'm the one you're accusing, aren't I? I thought you wanted to search me. No, Inspector, not you. Somebody else. What's the meaning of all this, eh? Lost it at last, have you, sunshine? The court shouldn't have put up with this nonsense. You're being completely irrational. Be quiet, all of you. Bruno's doing what you all told him to do and having the courage of his convictions. So you should respect that and listen to what he has to say in good faith. Because that's the British way. Well said, young lady. Indeed, this court is in awe of the defense counsel's conviction and eagerly awaits his next words. You what? Now don't be hasty, my lord. If I'm not mistaken about the things I've seen in court today, I'm fairly sure that I know who has that disc at the moment. There's only one person it can be. Counsel, of whom do you request this search now? Nash Skulkin. Oh, my lord, Mr. Nash Skulkin. Well, I never. Eh, blimey, me? Him? Very well then, bailiff, restrain the witness and conduct a thorough search of his personal effects. Please, my lord. Inspector, Scotland Yard has to object to this search. Unfortunately for you, Inspector, your objections carry no weight here. Eh? In this courtroom, only the prosecution and the defense have the authority to object. But Lord Van Zeeks, I have no idea what forces are in play that might influence your actions. But personally, I have no intention of obstructing the course of this trial. Ag. Bailiff, carry out the search. Now hold on a mo, I don't know nothing. Nothing about no disc. Cut it out! Ah! Here, my lord. In the witness's pocket. I found this. Good lord, that's another music box disc. I don't know nothing about it. Nothing. That is the second music box disc left behind by Magnus McGilded. Is it not, Inspector Gregson? Berg, arg! Order, Mr. Skulkin, what have you to say for yourself? Gordon Bennett, just Gordon Flamin' Bennett. I swear I didn't know nothing about that disc, honest to God. Counsel, would you please explain what exactly is going on here? The alleged deal that was struck between this witness and this detective, no? Without question, my lord. And for pity's sake, why on earth was this man in possession of the disc the inspector traded for information? Inspector Gregson is a shrewd, calculating man who rarely loses his composure, but at one particular point in this trial he exhibited some unusual behavior for a brief moment. I don't recall what unusual behavior. Ah, it was, yes, during my cross-examination of Mr. Graydon. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? I admit to nothing of the sort. While Mr. Graydon answered my questions, the inspector appeared to have grabbed Nash Skulkin by his coat and was shaking him violently. Yeah, he did and all. Thought me noggin was gonna fall clean off, I did. I was wishing I'd been born as me brother, I was. And what exactly happened to make the detective attack you like that? I ain't got a clue, he just suddenly turned and grabbed me, whistled like that, and started shaking me. Why the blazes didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down to the station? That's what he said. Yelled it right down me ear hole, he did. He had still throbbing now. The way the detective behaved then was extremely out of character, but looking back now, it must have been then that he did it. That was the opportunity Inspector Gregson created for himself in order to hide the disc. Well, bless my wig, he hid it. You... But I'm afraid I failed to comprehend the motive here. If the detective had acquired the disc he was after, why on earth would he then proceeded to hide it in another man's pocket? This is a court of law. He could have submitted the item as evidence. It would appear, my lord, that the inspector was not at liberty to do that. Why ever not? As the man himself revealed earlier, his current assignment has some special conditions. My orders were recover the medium used to convey the secrets leaked from the ministry, and do it on the QT, strictly hush-hush. Hush-hush? A top-secret assignment, is it? As far as we're aware, the information stolen comes from confidential government communications. It would seem that if the information were to be revealed in court as evidence, it would be problematic. Excuse me. Is that the situation, Inspector? Sorry, my camera looks a little smudged. I'm just gonna wipe it real quick. I don't know that that helped much, but maybe it's a little better. I'm operating under direct orders from the ministry. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to answer that question. So, realizing there was a chance that you may be searched here in court, you took steps to hide the disc you had acquired from the witness. Ah, does this mean you only pretended to attack Mr. Skulkin in order to get close enough to him to slip the second disc into his pocket? So it was all a pretense. Well now, Inspector Gregson, and you, Mr. Graydon, are you prepared to admit to the accusation made against you of this alleged deal? Admit to it, yours truly, please. Mr. Graydon. Clearly our eastern visitor has an uncommonly active imagination. However, there's no proof that I passed that disc to the inspector.
Objection.
But then, how do you explain the reason why you knew about the peephole? I'm under no obligation to explain. What? Yes, I lied in my testimony. That, I admit, so sentence me accordingly. But that is all I admit. Murder, leaking government secrets, striking a deal with the detective. All of it is this young Eastern man's fancy. I have no idea what any of that is about. You what? I mean, they're never gonna admit to it, like... Well, what about you then, Inspector Gregson? Do you admit to making a deal with Mr. Graydon in order to acquire the disc? Ladies and gents of the jury, as a Scotland Yard inspector, I will declare this and nothing more. I am acting in the best interests of the country. Whatever I have done, it's been in the name of justice. So, as members of the public of this fine country, I'd like to think that justice will be your guiding light when you're making your decisions. This is quite a quandary indeed. Rarely have I encountered such extraordinary tumultuousness in the concluding of a trial. Nevertheless, in the absence of any further evidence to be presented, I believe it is time that we put the matter to the jury for their final leanings. Well now, as a fellow servant of Queen and country, I must say I sympathize with the old inspector. Yes, he's a dependable man, I'm quite sure. In service, one becomes a good judge of character. Even crossing your eyes doesn't help when it comes to looking at this case. It's all blurred to me. Well, as a fellow professional, I'd like to put my faith in the detective, really. Graydon is highly skilled operator. Stop. Currently in presence of idol. Stop. Detective has very much trust in eyes. More than this I cannot say. I don't believe it. These 6 jurors they're gonna believe Gregson. If they declare their decision now, is Ginny gonna be found guilty? I don't manage to produce some definitive evidence right now, then we're going to lose. Either some proof that Graydon killed Mr. Wenderbank, or stole those government secrets, or some evidence to force Gregson into admitting that he struck a deal with the witness. Well then, counsel, I think it's time I imposed on the jurors to declare their final decisions no, that is, unless you have some compelling evidence you have thus far not presented to the court. If I let the judge call on the jurors to announce their leanings, Gina will be found guilty. So there's no choice then, Runo, you have to throw some more evidence at them. This is it now, it all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against, Gregson or Graydon? Who do we do that with? Oh, it literally does not matter. Yeah, we'll just say Gregson. Why not? Inspector Gregson, there is one final piece of evidence I would like you to see. Yeah, what's that then? You refuse to acknowledge that you did in fact strike a deal with the witness here today, then you leave us no choice but to examine this piece of evidence thoroughly. Well, go on. This is my last chance. It looks like I'm going to have to force his hand here. One final piece of evidence to get this detective to admit to the deal he clearly struck with Graydon.
Take that!
Is that Mr. McGilded's peculiar music box, counsel? Yes, with a disc already in place ready to play, I think perhaps now would be a good time to listen to the sound produced by the music box again. Only this time, with the second disc we've just discovered set in place as well. Goodness, this disc, counsel? No, wait! I can't let you do that! Why not? Because, well, because it's got nothing to do with this case, that's why.
Objection!
Not true, Inspector. The defense has already proposed. The sounds heard by the court earlier from this music box were part of a Morse Code message. We know that Morse Code comprises of two distinct tones. The defense believes that the second disc contains the second tone needed to complete the message, and now we have a chance to confirm that theory. We're crying out loud, Sunshine. We're talking about state secrets here. You go letting the whole courtroom hear confidential information like that, it's treason. Then do you admit the charge? That in order to protect those state secrets, you engaged in unlawful dealings with the witness. You're mad. If you let that secret information out into the public domain, you'll be making an enemy of the entire British government, you idiot. Let's not forget, Inspector, that you, a Scotland Yard officer, leaked confidential case details to a witness. That you continue to lie to the court, and all because by fair means or foul you're determined to do your duty. Well, by fair means or foul, I'm prepared to do mine. Don't you dare. I will stop at nothing to protect my client. I don't care who I make an enemy of. My lord, if you please, the court must hear the sounds made by that music box. Come on, Van Zeeks, for Pete's sake, stop him. Inspector, you should know my methods by now. I'm a prosecutor, I'm no Scotland Yard puppet. Erg. In this courtroom, my duty is to the law, so let me propose a toast. To uncovering the truth, by fair means or foul. No! Very well, the defense's stance here and that of the prosecution has been made very clear, I feel. Therefore, in accordance with the defense's request, the court will now listen as this music box is set in operation once more. This time with the second disc in place and both discs playing simultaneously. Oh, listen to that. It's unmistakable now. It's Morse code. All right, I admit it. Whatever you want. But for the love of God, shut that bloomin' box up. Let me ask you again then, Inspector Gregson. Did you, or did you not, strike a deal with the witness next to you in the stand, Mr. Ashley Grayton? Specifically, did you furnish the witness with confidential case details in exchange for this music box disc? Did you reveal the existence of the peephole in the pawnbroker's storeroom door, Inspector? I did. Stop, what are you doing, man? It's all exactly like the young Eastern lawyer said. When the trial resumed after the recess and we were stood here in the stand together, that's when he approached me with the deal. Shut up, you imbecile. Shut up! Psst, you there. You're the detective who turned up at the pawnbrokery the other day, aren't you? I may have something you're looking for, Inspector, with me at this very moment. So how about a trade? I suggest you accept. Or information that may make certain individuals uncomfortable will soon become very public indeed. I couldn't let that information become public knowledge, not under any circumstances, so I accepted the man's proposal and told him details about the case that should have put him in the clear. The peephole in the storeroom door, and the bloodstains on the overcoat. By giving false testimony, this witness intended to have the defendant wrongly accused of murder. Inspector, you knew that, yet you still revealed those details to facilitate the witness's perjury. I did. But then it turned out the peephole had only been made that night after the incident took place. Scotland Yard wasn't aware of that, if I'm perfectly honest. Well, Mr. Graydon, what do you have to say for yourself? Ugh. Ugh. There's nothing and no one left for you to hide behind. You struck a deal with the inspector in order to escape conviction of a very serious crime, namely this. You are the third intruder who broke into the pawnbrokery on the night in question, and you perpetrated the murder of the proprietor, Mr. Pop Wendebank. You... Traitor! Bailiff, restrain that man, at once! That's it then. It's all over. I despised my life growing up. Those slums are a vile place. I was cursed from birth, born into poverty, the son of a penniless artisan. My parents did nothing but quarrel all day long. What little money they had was never spent on me. So I set about studying, to better myself, to one day escape from that hellhole. And you eventually became a communications officer. I admire your determination. But then you decided to try to sell government secrets? Why? Isn't it obvious? Because I wanted money. Even now, years later, the nightmares of my life in the slums wake me in the small hours. I wanted to drown them out with more money than anyone who lived in that squalor could ever imagine. Then one day, I met him. Mr. Magnus McGilded. You're a fiend with a clear talent, so you are. I've money to throw your way if you're interested. All you need do is go along with me little plan now. I was to steal the ministry's telegraphic message logs, and McGilded would buy them for a handsome sum. As I was responsible for inspections of the Ministry's communications office, it was a simple enough task. The lure of the devil's offerings, how easy it is to succumb. You must surely have realized the seriousness of the crime you were committing. And for that reason, I took great lengths to ensure that my actions were untraceable by using the music box. My father was a brickmaker, though my mother divorced him when I was still a child. Yes, Mr. Mason Milverton. That's right, he was very skilled with his hands. He'd once been a music box maker's apprentice. I imagined his skills would be sufficient to create a machine that could generate Morse Code, so I sought out my father again to employ his services. It was the first time I'd seen him since I left the slums 10 years earlier. Look at you, Ashley. What a fine gent you've become, eh? He was a different man to the one in my memory, a thin, frail old man. But poverty had never broken him, never corrupted him like it had me. I was sure that he wouldn't help me if I told him the real reason. So I made up a story. I've got some work for you, Father. I need some music box discs made. Music box discs, eh? A musician friend of mine had written some music he wants to sell to the public. I've brought the score with me. There are 2, actually. I'd be delighted, son. It's been 20 years since I did any work like this, though. Fetch my tools, would you? They're in the loft. That's how I had him make the 2 discs. Thereby splitting the information in 2. You were taking considerable precautions indeed. It was to protect myself as much as anything. It meant that I could deal with McGilded in 2 separate transactions. The first involved the first of the 2 discs in the music box for playing them, and exchange them with McGilded for 10 guineas. Then, on receipt of the second disc, he would pay 1,000 guineas. So, what happened on the omnibus 2 months ago was the second part of a deal, the exchange of the second disc. Yes, I had sold the man information that way a number of times already, but it seems he became reluctant to part with his money. But that doesn't quite make sense, Mr. Graydon, for why was it that on the omnibus 2 months ago, your father, Mr. Milverton, was the one dealing with Mr. McGilded and not yourself? When I received the 1,000 guineas after my first completed dealings with McGilded, I decided to give 200 to my father for his troubles. When my father realized something was amiss, in time he worked out that I must be involved in something dubious. And when he did, he said to me, "Next time there's an exchange, you'll let your old man do it, understand? Otherwise, I won't take your money anymore." That was my father's way of dealing with it, I suppose. Climb into the omnibus, hand over the second disc, and take the money from the Gilded, that's it. He had no idea what was actually on the discs I'd asked him to make, he never knew. Just like I'll never know why everything went so horribly wrong that night. All I know is that the disc was taken from him, and he never returned home. It was only then that I found out what sort of a monster McGilded really was. So after 10 years of not once uttering it, I swore on my father's name to exact revenge. Revenge? As anyone with even the remotest knowledge of the man will no doubt be able to imagine, McGilded brought all his wealth and influence to bear in the most despicable of ways. To crush any semblance of justice in his trial. The crime scene was tampered with, evidence was fixed, and witnesses were bribed. That trial 2 months ago was a farce from start to finish. My feet had barely touched British soil back then, and I walked into that hornet's nest completely unaware of the sinister background to it all. I made plenty of money out of my dealings with McGilded by then, so I spared nothing in my arrangements. 2 months ago, I knew exactly who to hire. If you're willing to pay the price, there are people in this city willing to do anything you ask. McGilded himself had shown me that. Are you saying that I think you have the picture now? After he twisted everything to his favor in the courtroom to ensure he walked free, I took matters into my own hands and delivered the justice that monster deserved. That tragic accident following the trial here 2 months ago was planned and executed by yours truly. McGilden's death that day was caused by this man. Everything is ready, sir, if you'd like to follow me into the courtroom. What's this, officer? 'Tis sooner than I was led to believe. I hope it's not inconvenient, sir. There were some changes to the schedule. Well, I must be making tracks now. It's time for the inspection. They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself. Well, that policeman who came to tell McGilded he could examine the omnibus again. That's right, an imposter hired by me. McGilded used his wealth to manipulate the trial. He paid people to adulterate the omnibus with all manner of false evidence. He threatened witnesses to lie in their testimony. So I gave the man a taste of his own medicine. As the omnibus was doused in paraffin, one of my sham policemen ushered McGilded inside and set him on a one-way journey to hell. An eye for an eye. That's how I avenged my father's death. A spine-chilling account indeed. That wasn't the end of it for me. There was a loose end, you see. A loose end? Yes, I should think it's obvious. The second disc, which my father had taken to exchange with McGilded. Ah, yes. There was indeed no mention of it in the man's trial 2 months ago, clearly because it had been removed from the scene of the crime. When I realized it was missing, I remembered something. Something from the first time I dealt with McGilded. This is the first of the 2 discs and the music box you need to play them. Well, look at that now. What an ingenious little invention. So then, as promised, 10 guineas for you, young man. What's this? Windibank's pawnbrokery. Ah, it is a pawnbroker's ticket, so it is. You can use it to redeem an article I've deposited there for you. There's no need to give a name, just hand over the ticket and tell the theme the watchword. Put a jewel in pawn for you. It'll fetch a good 10 guineas if you sell it, so it will. Never heard of a pawnbrokery being used in quite that way before. Have ye not, Mr. Graydon? London's pawnbrokeries are a very useful place, you know. Each one is like an extremely secure vault. So basically using the pawnbrokery as a way to exchange goods. So I knew that if he'd taken steps to hide the disc, it would be in that pawnbrokery somewhere. And on the night he killed my father, he must have entrusted the ticket to someone. Yes, to Gina. I remember now that when we first met you at Windibank's that afternoon 2 days ago, you had a description of Miss Lestrade written down. How did you know what you were looking for? Who you were looking for? From the trial, that pickpocket's testimony was clearly peculiar. Anyone could see that. I realized immediately that she was another of McGilded's pawns, that he must have threatened her somehow. I was fairly convinced it would be her who had the ticket. So I started to make some inquiries. I had a strong suspicion the girl would come out of the woodwork on the redemption deadline. And he was absolutely right. And yes, sure enough, she did. All I needed to do was wait until the girl went to Windibank's to redeem the article. But unfortunately, she redeemed only McGilded's overcoat and the one disc that was in its pocket. The all-important music box with the second disc inside was missing, because it had already been forfeited 2 days earlier. But I was unaware of that fact. Had I not been, I could have avoided my nighttime excursion. Meanwhile, as our investigation into the stolen government secrets was progressing, we'd picked up on the fact that McGilded was involved. Inspector, you've recovered fast. My orders were to recover the stolen information as quickly as possible, so we started gathering the fellow's possessions and examining whatever we could lay our hands on. We had a full-scale investigation going on at the yard, but we had to keep it as quiet as we could. Then, when the inspector here took the disc from me in the pawnbrokery that day, I became nervous. I was sure the music box and the second disc were still there in the shop somewhere, so I knew it was a race against time. I had to find those articles before the police did, so that's what prompted you to break into the place that same night. With the help of your old friends, the Skulkin brothers. What happened that night in the pawnbrokery, I can only describe as a nightmare. While Nash and Ringo were searching the counter, I'd located the music box I'd sold to McGilded on the shelves of forfeited articles. And the second disc was inside? Yes. Slipped it into my pocket with a very deep sigh of relief. Then, something entirely unexpected happened. What are you doing in my shop? A gunshot rang out in the shop, and I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. The broker fired his gun, and the bullet pierced your limb. Yes, exactly, but unfortunately, I'd decided to bring my own gun with me that night, just in case. Before I knew what was happening, I'd fired back. The man had already turned to flee. I hadn't intended to fire in his direction, much less kill him. But unfortunately for both of us, the bullet hit home. It struck him in the middle of his back as he fled through the storeroom door for refuge. A sorry, sorry tale. It all took place in the blink of an eye. I don't imagine Nash and Ringo even realized what had happened at first. I was terrified, so I fled. And that's the whole story. That's everything that happened at Windibanks on that wretched night. Earlier, you called McGilded a monster. A man who used his wealth and influence to distort the facts and escape justice for the crime of murder. A tragic irony, for what you have done is exactly the same. You've become the very monster you saw and despised so deeply in McGilded. Yes, I think I have. Well, this has been a long and exhausting trial. However, it would seem that at last we have arrived at the truth. Inspector Gregson, what of Mr. Ashley Graydon? He's been restrained, my lord, and is being escorted to the yard. He'll be charged with the murder of Mr. Windibank and the stealing of government secrets. Very good. And you, Inspector, regrettably, you will have to face charges yourself. Yes, my lord, of course. It transpires that you were complicit in helping a criminal escape justice. That fact remains, whether or not you were doing so in the line of duty. The crime is a serious one, Inspector, and inexcusable. Now to the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade. Ah, yeah? It is time for the final adjudication. Is the jury ready, Mr. Foreman? Yes, sir. Garrett Squadron standing by, sir. This is really it now. The last push, the final call, the finishing whistle. My men are ready to deliver their verdicts. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I will now declare your final decisions to the court.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
We did it! Aha! That's the stuff. I'm off the hook. Finally, Runo, you finally managed to do it. Finally is the word. I really wasn't sure if we'd come out on top for a while there. Susie was right. You're the best lawyer in the world. Miss Lestrade, I am not finished with you yet. And what are you looking at me like that for? Before you start enjoying your freedom, there are certain other crimes to consider. Eh? 2 months ago, in my courtroom no less, you gave false testimony, did you not? And in relation to the trial today, not only did you unlawfully enter Winterbank's pawnbrokery, you also attempted to abscond with Mr. McGilbert's property, it seems. Eh? I never done nothing of the sort. Of course not. It's not like you were gleefully wearing McGilbert's coat in your cell yesterday or anything. Oh, and just when I was getting excited about throwing a party for Ginny this evening. And turning our attention to the defense, determining that when played together the music box disc contained a message in Morse code was, well, it was certainly a most unexpected revelation, counsel. Quite so, my lord. The prosecution was caught entirely off guard. In fact, I think we should applaud my learned friend's courage here today. I propose a toast to demanding that government secrets be disseminated before the entire courtroom. Ah! Very sorry about that. It was the only way I could get Inspector Gregson to admit to what he'd done, so... if I may say something on that point, isn't that? It's, about the sounds produced by that music box before. I do wonder if that was really Morse code at all. What? What are you saying, madam? Oh, well, it's just that I'm really rather fanatical when it comes to Morse code, you see. So much so that the whole world seems to be covered in dots and dashes to me, in fact. Goodness, madam, an unhealthy level of obsession one feels. I must say that in my opinion, the sounds produced by those 2 discs were nothing more than that. A meaningless series of 2 different tones. What? Can that really be? It wasn't Morse code after all? My lord, the defense would like to listen to the music box again. Are you off your nut? How many times do I have to tell you those discs contains minstrel secrets, sunshine? This courtroom is not an appropriate forum to discuss the nature of the government communications. We know McGilded conspired to trade national secrets with our enemies, secrets acquired from Mr. Graydon. Now that the man has admitted to his crimes, we have no need to pursue the matter further. But it's really going to bother me. Miss Lestrade? Yeah, me lord? That which you have seen here in this courtroom has been extremely disturbing. Falsified evidence, intimidation, perjury, a grim catalog of depravity. Appalling experience to befall any child. Come on, it ain't nothing I don't see most days in the back slums. I beg your pardon. If you're weak, you pay for it. That's just how life goes. Gina. But look, I reckon I've worked something out today. The world ain't fair, but if you want it to change, you gotta start it. You gotta change how you are yourself. Well, that's a very laudable lesson, I would say. I eagerly look forward to the born-again Miss Lestrade never gracing my courtroom with her presence again. Now, with regard to the murder of Mr. Poplin-de-Bank, proprietor of a pawnbrokery business on Baker Street, I hereby declare the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade, not guilty. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of epilogue. We're already running pretty late, but I don't think it makes sense for me to, like, get into this next week. That is all. Court is adjourned. On a personal note, I must say you've surprised me, my Far Eastern friend. Oh. Despite being a Nipponese, you saw through the pretense to the malice that festered within that Englishman, and at the same time saw through the grime to the surprising heart of your English client. You have a curious talent for judging character, especially considering our very different cultures. I don't think there's anything curious about it. Whether we're from the Empire of Great Britain or the Empire of Japan, We're all human beings. We're not so very different on the inside. You know, I took this case for one very simple reason. To lock swords with you once again here in the courtroom. You did. When I encountered you for the first time 2 months ago, it reminded me of toasting friendship and trust with another Nipponese, only to find my trust betrayed. Through you, I hope to look into the eyes of the man I once knew and try to understand. You mentioned something similar earlier today about total betrayal at the hands of the Japanese. What happened exactly? Well, you may ask. And one day, when the time comes, you will learn the answer, whether you like it or not. Alright, then I'll wait for that day if I must. Coming to be known as the Reaper of the Bailey in my retirement from service 5 years ago gives me cause to wonder if our meeting has some deeper purpose. So, farewell, my learned Nipponese fellow, until we meet again. Interesting. So not all of our loose ends are tied up yet. I imagine that is where Game 2 comes in. 17th of April, 5:24 p.m. Old Bailey, Defendant's Antechamber. It's done. It's over at last. But where's Iris disappeared to? Ah, congratulations, Gina. I knew it all along. I knew that you were innocent. Well, you did what you said, Mr. Naruhodo. You believed in me right up to the end. You're as odd as your name. What's odd about it? I told you I had faith in you, didn't I? No one ever has before, see? Kept a promise, I mean, properly. That's awful. I figured something out today. All my life, growing up in the slums, I've never trusted no one. But that's just because I've been scared of being stabbed in the back. I mean, the more you trust someone, the more it hurts when they let you down. Yes, I think I can understand that. After all, I had a taste of it in that trial 2 months ago. I chose to trust someone and paid for it. That betrayal left a big scar. You know though, Gina, I worked something out quite recently too. Trusting in someone else is really an exercise in learning to trust yourself. And when your gut tells you it's the right thing to do and your trust is rewarded, there's no better feeling in the world. I think I have you to thank for reminding me of that valuable lesson. Oh, well, if you say so. Don't make a fat lot of sense to me, though. I'm trying to say that putting my faith in you, Gina, has been a real pleasure. For crying out loud, pack it in. But I suppose I sort of feel the same way. I mean, sometimes trusting someone else is, you know, alright. Thanks. This is the way I see it, Ryunosuke. A defense lawyer is only as good as his faith in his client. And that comes down to how much faith he has in himself. After this experience, I'm starting to feel like I understand what you mean. Kazuma, am I living up to your expectations? Am I turning out to be the lawyer you believed I could be? Pardon the interruption. But what the deuce does a man have to do to be noticed around here, my dear fellow? Ah, that voice! It's too late for that voice now, Mr. Naruhodo. I've been standing here patiently in the corner of the room for an eternity. Aha, aha, yes, it was me all along, I would have said when finally you noticed me. But you people with your incessant babbling. Ah, Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes, it was me all along, you see. I like how even the other bailiff was surprised. I'd assumed you'd been taken back to the hospital, to be honest. Indeed I was, but I managed to escape again. Oh. I happen to be aware of one or two foibles of the doctor who was tending to me. I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily issued me with a leave of absence. How very above board. But enough of my adventures. That was a fine victory, Mr. Naruhodo. Your tireless efforts justly rewarded, I feel. Congratulations are in order. As a close friend, I tip my hat at you. Oh, thank you. Some great detective you are. Great at being cold as ice, maybe. Have I irked you in some way, Miss Lestrade? While you've been having a snooze in your nice soft bed, some of us have been fighting for our lives. Oh, well, that bullet did cause me to lose a substantial amount of blood, it's true. So I have indeed been feeling somewhat cold. Not perhaps cold as ice, but, well, have a feel. Do take your hands off my neck, please, Mr. Sholmes. And, in some way, I suppose, congratulations are in order for you too, Miss Lestrade. What's that supposed to mean? Why so half-hearted? Well, naturally, it isn't my intention to alarm you, but an acquittal in a trial with that particular prosecutor is perhaps a little precarious. Well done, Mr. Sholmes. Not alarming in the slightest. Oh, the Reaper, you mean? Because anyone who's found not guilty in a trial he was working on winds up dead anyway, is that it? The very point I was trying to make. It's exemplified by the fate of Mr. McGilded, in fact. Ah, but of course, I pay no attention to such irrational drivel myself. Yeah, well, it don't bother me. Oh, really? Of course not. The way I see it, the Reaper's a bit like him upstairs. Him upstairs, you mean, like God? Yeah, him upstairs knows what's what, right? He knows what people are like on the inside. He won't have got the wrong end of the stick. There are some coves like that bog trotter what are rotten to the core. At the end of the day, him upstairs makes sure they get what they deserve. I suppose that's one way of looking at it. Divine justice is one thing, though. The Reaper taking matters into his own hands and claiming lives is another. Well, I ain't like the McGildeds of this world, so I ain't scared. I got principles, see? A trait in you which is to be admired, Miss Lestrade. Oi, just give a rest, alright? As I was saying, congratulations are in order. News of your acquittal was very welcome news to me indeed. Let me express my heartfelt congratulations, Gina. Well, there you are, Hurley. How long have you been here? Honestly, I went to the main entrance expecting especially to meet you there. Ah, Iris, my dear, I do apologize. But wait until I tell you what happened. This pair made utter fools of themselves. What happened? As you know, I have a penchant for disguise. I was hiding in this room dressed as a bailiff. But these dolts didn't notice my presence at all. Ah, they had no idea. Can you imagine, Iris? Would you credit it? I'm not sure, really. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, Hurley, but you just don't have the weighty presence you seem to think you have. In fact, you really ought to be careful about that. It's going to land you in trouble one day. I'll be careful. Ouch. Anyway, it's such a shame. I was so hoping to throw a party for Ginny tonight. But you won't be able to come, will you? Don't look like I'm going to be going nowhere for a while. You heard the judge's patter. I got stuff to make amends for, apparently. All of them offenses. What was it again? Breaking and entering, taking the bog trotter's stuff, what was in lug, blah blah blah. Yeah, I think you'll find that basically being a pickpocket is the main offense. But diving ain't an offense, it's a job, innit? I don't think so. Still, it has got me thinking all this. Maybe I should start looking for another line of work. I mean, you didn't start off as a lawyer, did you, Odo? Well, no, but I was never a pickpocket. Well, anyway, I reckon I could make a change. I'm gonna do something for all them lot like me from the slums, something that makes a difference for them. That's a wonderful idea, Ginny, and I'm sure you can do it. Hehehe. What is it? Nothing. Miss Gina Lestrade. Prison carriage has arrived, ma'am. Come with me to the rear gate at once. Right. Well, looks like I'm off then. Yes, goodbye, Gina, and good luck. Odo. Yes? Ah! What was that for? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say, so... Ah, indeed. Perhaps the situation calls for a phrase hitherto missing from your vocabulary, Miss Lestrade, eh? On a case such as this, I would recommend a simple thank you. Oh. Oh, yes! It's good advice, Ginny. Right, I see. Well... Thanks, Odo. Aww. Thank you for everything what you've done, for believing in me. Aww. Not at all. In fact, that should be my line. Thank you, Gina. That's sweet. Well, there she goes. Wonder if I'll ever see her again. Well, quite the indomitable pick purse. Oh, I nearly forgot. I bought a paper outside. It's a special edition, and this trial is all over the front page. Pickpocket's innocence proven. Isn't it wonderful? You should have shown it to Gina, Iris. She would have been thrilled. Oh no, how silly of me. But anyway, would you like the good news or the bad news? Not again. Well, what do you say, Runo? Curly? As usual, I think I'd rather get the bad news out of the way first. Absolutely not. I have no intention of listening to anything but good news. And there you have it. How people answer that question says a lot about them, doesn't it? Let's not go there. Alright, then maybe let's start with the good news this time. The rain has finally stopped. There's a record level of rainfall, apparently. Well, that is good news indeed. We can journey back in greater comfort. Alright then, what's the bad news? The huge storm has left the seas very choppy. Channel in particular is awful, so sailings out of Dover have been delayed by a day or more. Wait, Dover? That's right. If we head to the station immediately, we may still make it in time to wave Susie off. But, there won't be a train, surely. We couldn't have been that lucky. Who do you think I am, Mr. Naruhodo? Mr. Sholmes? I rushed to Victoria Station earlier and made arrangements for a special express. If we hurry now, we shall be there in time for dinner. And I know of a fine restaurant that serves the most delicious baked sole. I don't. The great detective does it again. Indeed he does. I happen to be aware of a number of the rail transport director's foibles. What? I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily laid on the locomotive elementary. Just an idea, but it might be wise to stop manipulating people that way. What are we waiting for, then? To London, Victoria. Port of Dover, quayside. That took someone longer than I had anticipated. Susie's boat must be about to leave now. Miss Susato, where are you? Over there, look! Looks like she's reading something.
Hold it!
Miss Susato, wait! What are you doing? Mr. Naruhodo, what are you doing here? We came as soon as we could after the trial, I mean. We heard that sailings were being delayed due to bad weather, you see. Oh, I see. Then tell me, how did Gina's trial go? It went well. She was acquitted. That's wonderful. Really wonderful news. Well, why were you about to throw your book into the ocean? The book you were about to throw into the sea was your Encyclopedia of British Law, wasn't it? Oh dear, I was hoping you hadn't seen that. I'm not worthy of practicing law in any way now, so I was saying my final farewell. We were saying goodbye to law, you, Susato-san. Would I be correct in assuming it's because of the peephole, Miss Susato? I deliberately altered the scene of a crime, and then I tried to hide the fact. What I did is utterly unforgivable. That reminds me. How did you even come to have this, Susie? On the evening of the incident, Mr. Sholmes had invited Gina to dinner, if you remember. Oh yes, we had a wonderful time. Well, Gina gave us a little introductory lesson, didn't she? To the art of pickpocketing, I mean. Oh, that was so much fun. I stole Runo's armband. Yes, please don't do that again, Iris. That band's very important to me. Well, if it's so important, you should pay more attention to it. You didn't notice for ages. On a whim, I thought it would be fun to see if I could take the cat flap-o-mat, but I put it up my sleeve. Really? And then I rather forgot about it until I found myself in Mr. Windibank's shop with it later that night. I see. And then... Ah, Mr. Sholmes! Mr. Sholmes! Leave me, Naruhodo. Right. After Mr. Naruhodo had left the shop, I started to think. That door started to play on my mind a bit. Storeroom door, you mean? Yes, if Gina was anywhere in the shop, I realized it could only be behind that door. At that moment, the little device that I had up my sleeve sprang to mind. I was so worried about Gina, I simply had to know. So you used the cat flap-o-mat to make the peephole in the door. As captured in a photographic print of the shop, on one of Hurley's red-handed recorders. Indeed, it was of the first importance, that point. Precisely when the peephole was made, that information would prove to be Mr. Naruhodo's greatest weapon. But naturally, without proof, it would have amounted to nothing. But when I looked through the hole in the door, the sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. Thoughts started to run through my mind. I remembered that trial 2 months earlier, the trial of Magnus McGilded. I thought about how he had manipulated the evidence and arranged false testimonies to secure his freedom. It made the British justice system feel very dark and sinister to me. And then a terrible thought occurred to me. What if some wicked criminal was planning to do the same thing now? Because from the appearance of the crime scene, it looked exactly as though Gina had shot Mr. Windibank. Even though I was sure she would never have done such a thing. You were worried that the true culprit would try to frame her for the crime? That's right, but then I realized it would be very difficult for anyone to give false testimony in this case. What do you mean? Well, the crime appeared to have happened behind the door of a locked room. For someone to claim falsely to have witnessed it, there would have to be a way to see beyond the door. Ah. For which a peephole would be the very thing. Only the peephole I had made wasn't actually there until after the crime had been committed, of course. And the criminal would know that, so it wouldn't make any difference. The possibility of a rather ingenious trap was there, was it not? A trap? Is that why she did it? So is that why you kept it a secret, Susie? You never mentioned that you made the peephole to anyone, not even the police. I know, and I knew at the time what I was doing was wrong, a criminal offense even. That's why I decided to confide in Mr. Sholmes. If Mr. Naruhodo was completely backed into a corner with no other possible means of escape, the truth about the peephole could save him. That was my plan. She really does think of everything. But then, why didn't you just tell me everything before the trial began? My dear fellow, you're not thinking straight. If she had done that, it would have rendered you complicit in the whole escapade. Ah. You could have been disbarred if you had been seen to have knowingly tampered with a crime scene. So Miss Susato decided to shoulder the burden of the responsibility alone, for your sake and Miss Lestrade's. Miss Susato. The truth is, when it happened, I did it because I've lost a little of my faith in the law. Oh. I was worried that the right person wouldn't be convicted of the crime. The moment I allowed myself to think that is the moment I lost my right to call myself a judicial assistant. What you did isn't comparable to what he did. Graydon is the one who lied in the witness stand using that peephole as a way to implicate Gina. And besides, if that peephole inconsistency hadn't existed, I'm not at all sure that she would have been acquitted in the end. Miss Susato, what you did saved Gina's life. Well, with your kind words, Mr. Naruhodo, you've saved me too from my regrets. Well, we must all be thankful that Miss Lestrade's freedom has been assured. Yes, exactly, although some of the loose ends in that trial will continue to play on my mind, I'm sure. But the revelation that the music box disc contained secret messages, Mr. Naruhodo. What a triumph to work that out. I'm full of admiration. Well, actually, that argument wasn't quite as compelling as I thought it was. Oh, it wasn't? There was a communications officer among the jury members, you see, a telegraph operator. And she said that the majority of the sounds on the disc were just meaningless tones. As one would expect, after all, we are talking about secret government communications. No doubt they were written in cipher to avoid being readily understood should they have been intercepted. In cipher? I see. Then we could never have hoped to understand the message anyway. Nonsense, my dear fellow. It's quite a zero-pipe problem, I assure you. Gi? What? Well, that can't be a real word, can it? How funny. Wait, Iris, what did you just say? Oh, I just said asogi. Does that word mean something to you? Mean something? Asogi was the name of my best friend. What? But how? How do you know that name, Iris? I wrote it down during the trial before when the message was playing on the music box. She transcribed it on the fly? She really is a genius. I thought the message probably wouldn't be written out in plain Morse code, so I tried various ways to interpret it. Whatever I tried, the words just didn't seem to make any sense. That is, in English at least. Oh. It suddenly occurred to me, you see. There's more than one Morse code, not just the English variety. Various countries around the world have altered and added to the Morse code to use it in their own languages. I don't believe it. Are you saying? That's right. I've only actually seen a chart of Japanese Morse code once before, but I think it's based on the Iroha pangram, isn't it? And you mean to say that in Japanese Morse code the message says asogi? Yes, I think so. Sorry, but I don't remember all of the Japanese Morse code. Iris, would you let me see that? Miss Susato, do you know it? Do you know Japanese Morse code? Yes, I spent some time studying it. And I'm quite sure Morse code will become ever more important for international communications. And might I recommend, my dear madame, that you focus your efforts on the English version? Be that as it may, Iris, show me the message, please. Of course. But what can this possibly mean? Whatever is in that long sequence of supposedly meaningless dots and dashes. It's made the color drain from Susato-san's face. There's no doubt that this message is written in Japanese Morse code, so the British Empire has been using Japanese for its secret communications. I don't understand the reason why, but the message appears to be a list of 4 people's names. 4 names? The first is Kei Asogi, Kazuma Asogi. Why was his name on that disc? The second is A. Shin. Shin, I don't recognize that name. The third is T. Gregson. Gregson? It would seem Tobias Gregson is the third man on the list. What What's his name doing in a secret government communication as well? And the last name? What's the matter, Miss Susato? It's just so strange, so unexpected. Oh, what is it, Susie? Don't keep us in suspense. The last name is J. Wilson. What? Wilson? John H. Wilson? You mean Daddy? It says only J. Wilson, so I'm afraid I can't be sure. Then, after the four names, it reads, if I translate from Japanese, that is all four. And that's the end of the message, or rather the end of what you noted down, Iris. I just can't believe it. Who would have ever thought? But those discs contain Japanese Morse code, not to mention a strange list of some disturbingly familiar names. It would appear that this particular message is a communication of some kind between Great Britain and the Empire of Japan. So Daddy could be in Japan then, where Susie and Runo come from. Oh, well... no, it's not very likely really, is it? I mean, there are thousands of people with the surname Wilson, and there must be lots of J's among them. Professor John H. Wilson, visiting professor of medicine at the Imperial Yume University. We can't tell Iris about that now, we just can't. This is so strange. Somehow, in solving the case of Mr. Wendebank's murder today, I feel like I've rolled back a boulder at the mouth of a very dark cave. I do wonder if perhaps it's a dark cave that we shouldn't go wandering inside. Honk! Oh dear, the ship is going to set sail soon. Yes, it seems so. I'll sail on that steamship first to the port of Dunkirk in France, then I'll change onto a larger passenger vessel bound for Japan. You're really going then, Susie? We wish you a safe passage, Miss Susato. Thank you so much. I wish all of you the very best. Miss Susato, I had hoped to have you always at my side to guide me and support me. Mr. Naruhodo, please, come back soon. As far as I'm concerned, you really are the very best judicial assistant in the world. I'm quite sure I'll be back before you know it. Really, Susie? Oh, now don't forget, Iris, I made you a promise I'm yet to fulfill. Promise? About your manuscript. Ah, oh yes, the Hound of the Baskervilles. I'll be waiting for you then, Susie. A promise is a promise. Definitely, Iris. Mr. Naruhodo? You remember the first time we met? Yes, of course. On the SS Burio when I was dragged out from that wardrobe still half asleep. If I remember rightly, you threw me halfway across the cabin with the Susato takedown. You know very well that I'm talking about after that. It's strange, but being thrown together as we were in that case, I somehow felt straight away that you were the perfect person to continue Kazuma-sama's great legacy. Miss Susato, my instincts were right. I really want to believe, no, I'm sure that I'll be back soon. Farewell until then. Aww. So I assume that's where Great Ace Attorney 2 is going to pick up.
Somehow we seem to have come to the end of the adventures of Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Or the first volume, at least. Looking back now, it feels as though fate has led me on this journey. Fate led me to becoming a lawyer, to traveling halfway around the world, to meeting the great detective. I'm sure there'll be trials and tribulations ahead. Of course there will. whatever happens, I know I'll be able to turn my fortunes around. After all, I have the greatest friends in the world on my side.
Oh. Ah, yes, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, Mr. Sholmes? I have some rather awkward news. The railway company has decided to sue over the special express train, apparently. Caused such a commotion on the line, all the other trains had to wait at stations. But really, we would never have made it to Dover in time otherwise. Anyway, I explained everything and how it was all your fault. Huh? I believe a formal complaint should be delivered to your office tomorrow. Not to worry, my dear fellow. According to Miss Susato, you love defending yourself in court. It's alright, I'm perfectly happy to testify. You really didn't look like the sort of man who'd do something so outrageous. See? Mr. Sholmes? Yes? A word, if you don't mind. Why, certainly, any word you like. Bellow it out, my dear fellow. Oh yes, I love Runo's words, and I know just the one he'll use here. I really must say...
Objection!
Ah! Okay, it looks like there is no way to skip the credits. But I am... following something, music boxes. Something was afoot though. Transpired I had ordered them all myself, so I advertised them for sale with used by Mr. Sholmes to solve an important case. And the money I've earned, consulting detective something. Okay, as I was saying, it's already late. I'm just gonna let the credits keep rolling, but I gotta take care of other stream management stuff that I can't do if I'm still live. So while these credits are rolling, I'm just gonna like quickly recap what's going on. Computer arriving Thursday or Friday. As soon as I get that computer back, actually I can't say as soon as because I'm busy Thursday night, but if I have it back and it is fully working by Friday night, I will do the Persona stream on Friday. And then, going forward, and by going forward I at least mean until I need to change the schedule again, the new stream schedule is going to be Tuesdays and Fridays, unless something happens that requires me to change it again. It'll either be Tuesdays and Fridays or Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but I am thinking Tuesdays and Fridays. But anyway, I will see you all next week. Or not next week. I will see you hopefully at the end of the week, if not at the end of the week next week. I don't know what we're going to play after this. We might jump into Great Ace Attorney 2. We might dive into something else. I honestly don't know. If you have suggestions, the best place to talk about that is in my Discord. You can get a link to that on this Twitch page somewhere. But yeah, I will talk to you all soon.